Yeah, so cheers. Yeah.
Yes.
Irene, we're happy with audio and video. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to today's SPC meeting of Wednesday, the 10th of June, 2026. I'd like to welcome all of you in person today and for those joining us online. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and is available for viewing via the Commission's website and YouTube. Committee members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in their deliberations throughout the meeting. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and acknowledge elders past and present. Apologies and leave of absence today. We do have apologies from Blakey, Member Moore, and we do have a request for a leave of absence from Member Frank for the 17th to 27th of July. Thank you very much for submitting that. All other members are attending in person today. Disclosures of interest, we do have a few to work through because this is a big agenda today, so please bear with me as we go through these. In relation to item 3.1, the City of Bossleton, Boxley Promenade Road, Commissioner Brooks has declared a perceived impartiality interest that her employer, Urbaqua, have previously provided water management services to urban quarter associated with their developments, including groundwater life support in the Dunsborough area. Urbaqua are not involved with its proposal. Commissioner Brooks, is there any ongoing financial relationship at this moment?
Yes, but not associated with this project.
On that basis, I believe it would be an indirect pecuniary.
Okay.
I'll just accept that. Okay, thank you. In relation to item 3.2, the standard structure plan, Short Lake Village Structure Plan, Commissioner Brooks has declared a direct pecuniary interest in that her employer, Urbaqua, currently contracted to complete the local water management report in support of his structure plan, and I understand you will be stepping out on this item. Thank you very much. On the same item, Member Franklin has declared an indirect pecuniary interest in that she is the principal planner for Franklin Planning and provides sub-consultant planning services to Hames Charlie, which is contracted to the City of Rockingham to prepare its strategy and scheme. As part of the engagement with the City, they have not been directly involved in the work or deliberations on the proposal on behalf of the City, but I understand that your preference is to step out on this item. On item 3.3, the precinct structure plan for Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan, Commissioner Heron has declared an indirect pecuniary interest in that they were engaged by the City of Melbourne to provide advice on the structure planning of the station precinct, Bull Creek, Murdoch in the current fiscal. Dan Urbis has provided consultant advice in relation to the community benefit scheme, and that you are contracted to step out on that item.
Yes.
Thank you. In relation to item 3.5, which is the significant development for Champion Lakes, Commissioner Adair has declared a perceived impartiality interest in that a family member who works in the planning and environment team at Lavin have made a deputation on this matter. So perceived impartiality. Members, is there any?
I'll step out.
Out on that one, so should we change it to actual impartiality? So you're stepping out on that item. And in relation to item 3.6, the Part 11B development application for the development on Albany Highway, East Victoria Park, Commissioner Heron has declared an perceived impartiality as a resident of the town of Victoria Park, with the property in some distance from the subject site on the other side of Shepparton Road, and Commissioner Heron assisted the town of Victoria Park on the Oak Street Station Precinct PSP whilst in their previous employment, but I understand that relationship is not ongoing.
That's correct.
I'm happy to accept that as perceived impartiality unless members have any concerns. On item 4.1, the City of Swan Local Planning Scheme number 17, Amendment 191. Member Harmon has declared an actual impartiality interest in that they are employed by the Sadley Property Group, who have residents in the reserve estate, who there may be a perception of some impact from this proposal, and so on that basis is opting to to leave the meeting. Very much. And on that same item, Commissioner Adair has declared a perceived impartiality interest, noting that the Vines Residents and Ratepayers Association has sought judicial review arising from her participation in the SPC meeting's consideration of proposed Amendment 9 to the City of Swan Structure Plan 37 at its meeting on the 18th of June 2025. Neither the subject proposal nor those proceedings, which are presently before the Supreme Court, give rise to any interest on Commissioner Adair's part, which could affect her ability to bring an impartial mind to this consideration. However, Commissioner Adair's preference is to step out on this item on a perceived impartiality interest. Thank you. Members, are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you very much. And just noting in relation to item 3.4, the 11B development application on Charles Street, North Perth. There is an interest in common shared by members in that this is within a planning control area. However, it is considered not to prejudice our ability to determine this impartially. And moving on now to disclosures of representation in relation to item 3.1. The City of Busselton Community Road Structure Plan. I would like to declare that I have met with representatives of the Dunsborough East Landowner Group in the normal course of my duties as WA Chair. The group have advocated for employment land in the Lot 6 Community Road Structure Plan, although are not party to it and do not represent, are not the applicant. They are in the adjoining structure plan area. I have not been provided with any information that is not being provided to members. And on item 3.3, the Precinct Structure Plan, Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan, I have met with representatives of the City of Melville over a year ago in relation to the centre plan in the normal course of my activities as WAPC. And again, I do not have any information that has not been available to me. Much lost there.
Maybe 20, 30 seconds worth.
Okay.
Just
Apologies for that disruption. Just to clarify that all members have indicated that they've received and considered the agenda ahead of today's meeting, and that we were noting that there has been additional questions from members, some information provided and some will be dealt with as we deal with the items. We do need to now deal with the previous minutes of Wednesday, the 13th of May, 2026. Any matters arising from the minutes that members wish to raise? If I could then have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes, moved by Member Franklin, seconded by Commissioner Adair. Is there any dissent? Thank you. The minutes are carried. Before we go to deputations and presentations, I would just like to let members in attendance today know that given that we have some quorum issues today, I am going to have to move the agenda slightly. And I would appreciate your patience with this. It will require us to first consider confidential item 4.1. It will then, which does require us to close the meeting, so apologies to disrupt, but I will have to ask you to leave the meeting and re-enter the room. We do try to avoid this where possible. And then we will deal with item 3.2, which has 2 verbal deputations, and we will then determine the item. We will then deal with the remainder of business as per the published agenda. So in relation to item 4.1, we have received 2 written deputations on that item, which have been provided in the agenda. And they have from, this is the City of Swan Local Planning Scheme. You don't need to leave until we're considering the item. There's the written deputations considered on the City of Swan Local Planning Scheme number 17, amendment number 191. We have received a written deputation from Dixon Low of the Vines Residents and Ratepayers Association and Swan Community Environmental Alliance against the recommendation. And we have received a written deputation on the same item from Andrew McLean representing the applicant Indara Proprietary Limited supporting the application, and members have received those in advance and had the opportunity to read those. We will now need to move behind closed doors to consider our one confidential item for the meeting. So members in person, thank you very much for accommodating this agenda change today.
We back on. Are you confirming that we're streaming?
On.
Thank you. So we are about to deal with confidential item 4.1. Commissioner Adair and Member Harmon have left the room with, as they have to disclose conflicts of interest on this item. And members of the public have left the room to allow the confidential session to start. But before doing so, I do need a resolution from the members that we close the meeting to the public while we consider confidential item 4.1. If I could please have a mover, thank you very much. That is moved by Member Knight and seconded by Member Franklin. Is there any dissent? Thank you. That is carried. We can now close the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, for rejoining us. We have on item 4.1, I do have a further declaration of interest to provide to the meeting from Commissioner Herron, an indirect pecuniary interest in the Urbis prepared the visual impact assessment report. It's currently contracted to Urbis on another project. This declaration was made prior to any discussion on the item, prior to the item being moved or seconded, prior to any questions being asked of officers. But as a result of this declaration, this item will be withdrawn from the agenda due to lack of quorum. And it is our intention to have this item either reconsidered by the next Statutory Planning Committee meeting or potentially by the WA Planning Commission next week. We'll now move to deputations on item 3.2. And I'll hand over to Jonathan to go through the deputations.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome everyone present in order to make a deputation today, whether that's in person or via Zoom. You will be invited to either join the table if you're here in person, or you will receive a panelist invite attending via Zoom. You have been advised of your allocated time, which will be managed by a timer appearing on the screen. If your presentation, this will be displayed on the screen throughout, and it's just requested that you advise as you wish to progress through. So our first deputation regarding item 3.2 will be from Brett Ashby, who is joining us online. So it's the standard structure plan, Duet Lake structure plan determination. Brett, you're just receiving an invite to rejoin as a panelist. Great, Brett. And if you could just unmute and turn on the camera.
We're there finally.
Yep, that's it. Thank you. And we're ready when you are.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time. The purpose of my deputation is really to speak to the city's recommendation on the structure plan and specifically in terms of the connection to Bojar Road. The city considers that that connection is essential in terms of providing for acceptable community connectivity, and failure to provide it would be inconsistent with good planning. As noted in the report, excuse me, Bojan Road is currently restricted to, not Bojan Road, sorry, Wellspring Road connection is currently restricted to one-way traffic movement only.
You seem to have frozen, Brett, if you can hear us.
Something?
We lost you there for a little while, Brett,
Yeah.
probably the last 30 seconds.
I've got a warning coming up saying the connection is unstable. So I'll start off with the report notes that the Wellspring Road connection is one-way movement only under the current development application. Unless there's some other approval that's issued, then the committee should really respect that current DA and assume that there will be no two-way access at that point. In terms of why a Bojar Road connection should be provided, I'll make 3 points. Firstly, it has been constant planning principle since the dawn of time that communities should be able to have convenient access to key destinations within their communities. And this principle should certainly apply to an urban development such as a lifestyle village that is located on the periphery of a urban development. This principle of community connectivity is enshrined in livable neighbourhoods, and understandably, you would have residents of that lifestyle village that would want to take advantage of facilities and services within the wider urban area, and may well have family and friends they want to visit within the urban area. And the alternative to two-way access at Wellspring Road is essentially another 2 kilometres of travel via Mandurah Road. And that's a road that is experiencing increasing traffic, will continue to experience increasing traffic over time. And due to the environmental constraints of the area, it doesn't really have any capacity to increase its capacity over time. The second point I'd make is that the provision of a linkage at Bojar Road has been a consistent element of planning for both the lifestyle village and the surrounding area. So it's been in place since the very first structure plan for that precinct. Wasn't provided purely for the original R20 sleeve of development, which has now been removed. There was always a connection proposed as part of the development of the lifestyle village, and forms part of and connects through to the main kind of central connection point of that estate. Finally, I'll make a point that the wider road network has always been planned around the provision of a connection at that point and not at Wellspring Road. That has obviously been a consideration of residents moving into the area, but also the road design network has been planned around it. The city's view is that Wellspring Road has been designed to accommodate a maximum of 1,000 vehicle movements per day. At full development of the lifestyle village and surrounding area, we expect that the traffic onto that road would well exceed 1,000 vehicles per day, and would result in unacceptable impacts to both the road performance and the amenity of residents in that area. They're really the points I wanted to raise. Thank you again for your time. I'm happy to assist with any questions that committee members may have.
Thank you very much for your deputation today, Brett. Emma Cole, Chair, speaking to you now. Members, do you have any questions of Brett? Go ahead, Commissioner Herron.
Yeah, thank you for your deputation, Brett, and understand the point, right? Obviously, lifestyle villages generally do have a level of restriction of access in terms of, I suppose, it won't necessarily be a public road as such. Was that considered as part of the original development application? Because I note that you said that there had been a consistent expectation around that road connection.
Yeah, so there was always, the original plan showed a strip of R20 along the gas pipeline easement, public open space. That was an original negotiated outcome in order to provide a more standard urban interface between this development and the surrounding precinct. The conversation when the proponents sought to expand the lifestyle village was around the quality of their development and the fact that their interface would provide an acceptable connection. That's fine, we accepted that, but the proposal always had a connection fairly central within the lifestyle village out via Bojar Road to the east, which would, whilst you don't have a traditional level of connectivity, it doesn't make the performance metrics of livable neighbourhoods. It would still provide good connectivity through to the nearby activity centres in particular, but also the wider community.
Thank you.
Member Harman.
Thank you, Chair. Brett, are you able to tell us or give us a bit of detail of the status of Maranka Street Road? Is that correct? Is that the one to the north of Bojar?
Sorry, I'll just have to look it up. I don't have the, I've got a map just to. So it's just to the north of Bojar, is it? So at the moment, that road's constructed. The east-west connection near Wellsprings isn't quite delivered yet. Believe they need to bring an expert out to to help facilitate connection across the gas pipeline easement. So at the moment, you don't have an east-west connection at Wellspring. You'd have to move out onto Kerosene Lane, but that will be resolved in time, is our expectation.
Sure. And so just to follow on from that, so that will provide a connection over the gas pipeline.
Yes, it will provide a connection over the gas pipeline. Our argument is that it's not an appropriate location for it, and it's restricted in terms of the nature of it.
Anything further for Brett? Thank you very much for your deputation today, Brett.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. For our next deputation, also regarding item 3.2, have Steve Allarding, Tom Hockley, and Simon Armstrong attending via Zoom. So just sending panelist invitations to, I can see Simon and I can see Tom Hockley. Steve isn't in the list, but I assume he's with one of the others who makes the deputation. Tom and Simon, if you can accept the panelist invites, please. Simon and Tom, you're in the panelist list. You just need to unmute and turn on your cameras, please. Are we waiting on Steve at all?
Yes, Steve has just indicated he's waiting on the deputation list. He is online. Not sure if he's showing up on the list there.
Not so far.
Are you able to proceed with your deputation without Steve?
Yes, yeah, we can get started.
Okay,
Not a
thank you.
problem. Yeah.
When you're ready, please.
Thank you. Look, thank you, committee, for the opportunity today. We wanted to thank the officers for their active engagement and input throughout the assessment process, which has led to their recommendation for support. And we've been given an opportunity to review and respond to the schedule modifications, all of which we support. We particularly note the officer recommendation to remove the requirement for the construction of Bojo Road, which we also consider is unnecessary for the reasons I'll outline today. The Lifestyle Village currently has an existing access to the public road network via Mandurah Road to the west and Wellspring Road to the north, as you've heard. Bojo Road is outside the boundaries of the Lifestyle Village and was required to be constructed by the developer of the adjacent subdivision as part of the Paradiso Estate structure plan. Bojo Road was not, however, constructed as part of the adjacent subdivision because it was determined by the WPC at the time that it wasn't required and instead has been developed for POS along the gas line easement abutting the eastern boundary of the Lifestyle Village. As detailed in the agenda report, both the consultant's transport study and the department's own transport team have confirmed that Wellspring Road is suitable for secondary full movement access to and from the village without the need for the construction of Bojo Road, and have concluded that the low number of vehicle movements arising from the completion of the village will not extend to the road, not exceed the road capacity of surrounding connecting roads. This will enable a development application to be supported for full movement access from the village in line with these technical findings. The department's also noted that connectivity within the surrounding locality can be achieved without Bojo Road linkage via the existing Wellspring Road connection, which provides linkages to the north and east via Maranka Street and Blissful Way over the pipeline once constructed. As outlined in the agenda report, the Bojo Road Reserve exists and is not proposed to be closed. Nothing as part of the SPC's determination of this structure plan alters that. This leaves the option available in the long term for the city or others to construct the road in the future if, for example, the village ceases to operate potentially after 60 years. In response to the city's desire to have capability for road access, this is still not lost, and the feasibility remains in the unlikely event that this would ever be required in the future. However, for the reasons expressed by officers in the agenda report, which we support, the traffic analysis confirms that this is not necessary. So for that reason, we're supportive of the officer recommendation and seek the SPC's support to that recommendation and associated modifications. Thank you, and we're happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for your deputation. We appreciate that you've been able to do that without Steve in attendance as well. Members, do you have any questions on this item? Go ahead, Commissioner Hepburn.
Yeah, thank you for your deputation. I suppose just further to the deputation that's just been made by the City of Rockingham, in which there would appear to have been a previous agreement in terms of the construction of the road. Is there a contextual change? So when you were talking about the section that hasn't been built, is that the reason for the change in position by the proponent?
Well, the expectation by the village operator all along has been that Bojar Road would be constructed by the neighbouring developer to the east. I mean, through this process, we've also undertaken further traffic analysis to understand, I suppose, the implications of not constructing Bojar Road, and the conclusions of our own transport expert and the department's own traffic team have been that the Wellspring Road access point as currently constructed would provide a suitable point of access for both ingress and egress for the small number of trips produced by the completion of the village, the eastern portion of the village in that location. So yes, it was an expectation of the village operator that the Bojar Road would be constructed by others.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for the deputies? No? Great. Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
And just for your awareness, we will move to consideration of this item straight away. Just we are dealing with the agenda slightly differently today due to managing the forum. So please feel free to remain online as we deal with the item, not as panellists, but as observers. So we will now move to consideration of item 2.2, which is the standard structure plan for Lakes Lifestyle Village, and we are joined by Anne Harrop, Aidan O'Brien, Sam Zimmerman and Tanya Asgar on this item.
Aidan's unwell.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, officers, for your report. I can see that the key issue is remaining is Bojar Road, which is addressed in the report, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to it and to respond to the deputy.
Thank you. Through the chair, comments made by the city were essentially the comments that they submitted via the structure plan submission, which we have considered throughout in the department. On balance with the existing access via Wellspring Road and Mandurah Road and the upcoming connection across Bonet Maranka Blissful Road, we understand that the estate is adequately serviced by the current road network. Happy to receive any questions.
Thank you. And we do have Tanvir, our engineer, here as well, if anyone wants to ask any questions of Tanvir. Members, do you have any questions? I'll go to Commissioner Adair.
Chair. I think the city has made some arguments around livable neighbourhoods and connectivity and I guess reasonableness at the end of the day. Would you like to comment more specifically? I know you have got comments in the report, etc., but have been raised again today, just for the record.
Okay, through the chair, to the directions right to the east of the Lifestyle Village, you've got a primary school site, which connection through Bojar Road would provide more direct access. However, being a lifestyle village, that connection or that desire point is not one that would be experienced by the residents of the lifestyle village. The local centre is located on Kerosene Lane, so the access via Wellstead Road and the future west-east connection across Maranka will provide for that access.
And
If I may add,
comment?
connectivity is good, but it can also create more rat runs as well. So if there is already good service points via Wellspring Road and Mareka Road to the center, that's well serviced between the lifestyle village and the attraction points, because the attraction point will be the local center rather than the school, given the nature of
Thank you.
Heron?
Thank you. And through the chair, just wanted to confirm, so the road reserve will still remain, so there is still the capacity should the nature of the village change, is my understanding. Just wanted to confirm that. Thank you. I'm also assuming that because it's crossing a gas pipeline, that the cost of construction is significantly higher than a standard road connection. Is that? Can you give some additional information in that regard?
Yeah, just to answer that question, it is significantly higher. We don't have the exact figures on that. There was some figures thrown around as part of subdivision clearance for that eastern subdivision where the road was originally proposed. We believe it was around the 1 million mark for just that small portion, but we don't have the exact figures. At the same time, there has been ongoing discussion with that connection for Maranka Road. Those values, or the financial side of that, has essentially been sorted out with the gas pipeline operator, but we're of the understanding that those works are still to occur, and it's likely that that'll be this year, but that's still that connection isn't there yet, but it's intended to be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you. We'll then move to consideration of the item 2.6. I could then have a move it. Moved by Commissioner Herod, seconded by Commissioner Adet. You make any comment?
Thank you. Through the chair, I would just say that, you know, it is about balancing the various considerations, and although I do understand the desire in terms of robustness being sought from the city, there is that notion of reasonableness that needs to be considered in the context of the existing land use configurations and restrictions. On that basis, I think that the proposal as is presented represents a suitable balanced approach, and I'm happy to support for such.
Thank you. Nothing further to add? Any further comments? Just to say that the city has been consistent in their position, and I think that, you know, that has been well fleshed out through the assessment period, and I'm satisfied that the connectivity as proposed is satisfactory, but I do understand the points that the city has raised, and concur with your points, Commissioner Herron, about the pragmatism and the configuration of the lifestyle village and what that does require. Are there any further comments? Is the consent? The item is carried. Then enable us to go back to deal with all other deputations, and again I will hand back to take us through this.
Chair. We're returning to consideration of item 3.1 now in terms of applications. City of Busselton, Ward 6, Common Edge Road, Structure Plan Determination. We have Jeff Forrest joined via Zoom. So Jeff, you're about to receive an invitation to return as a panelist. I can see you've joined on 2 devices. I'll send the invitation to both. Please just accept on the one. Just need you to unmute and turn on your camera, please, Jeff. Camera's working. Just need, oh, yeah.
All right, find me.
Yeah, looks good, sounds good. Thank you. We're ready to start when you are.
All right, thank you very much for being able to attend this meeting. I'll get straight to the point. On page 50 of your agenda, there's a table that shows how the structure plan fits in with the framework and policies of the state. It refers to being fully consistent with State Planning Policy 6.1, which deals with the Lewin Naturalist Ridge. Under that policy, this roadway that passes adjacent to the structure plan is described as a travel route corridor in a rural landscape area of significance. And if you go then on to page 35, our argument is that it's definitely not consistent with SPP 6.1, given its position on the state's planning framework hierarchy as being up on the top of the hierarchy. We feel that due regard's not been made to the policy, and in specific, the intent of the policy, which is really to protect the natural beauty of the Lewin Naturalist Ridge, which is recognised in all the planning framework as being of state and national significance. So specifically, we're concerned about the landscape and the use of visual screening being applied to this structure plan on what is a road that's designated in the SPP as of being importance to the rural landscape, which basically supports the whole economy of the area. You know, it's our both the SPP and the Lewin Naturalist Sub-Regional Plan recognise that it's the natural landscape, the rural landscapes, the seascapes that are fundamentally important, that underpin the whole economy. It's not the wineries, it's not the urban developments, it's not the town centres, it's just purely the natural beauty of the area. And the landscapes are the most important part of that, and they need to be protected. If we go to page 34, there's reference to SPP 6.1, which, you know, states that, you know, we need to look at protection of landscape, but it also states that there's no mechanisms described in the SPP as to how to go about that.
Jeff, just to let you know, you have reached your 3 minutes, and we do have many deputations today. So I will have to stop. I will have to stop you there and just, I think that your key point is about the protection of the Lewin Naturalist Ridge, and that's been understood.
Yeah.
I will now see if there are any questions of you. Members, are there any questions of Jeff? Yes, Commissioner Heron.
Yeah, thank you for your deputation.
Yeah.
Obviously, the structure plan has the location of the open space, etc., has been specifically undertaken to obviously around vegetation retention and protection of the ridgeline. So is it, your view is obviously that that is not sufficient in order to meet the objective under the Lewin Naturalist. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct. In particular, we don't feel that visual screening protects the landscape. It simply hides the landscape.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Jeff? Thank you, Jeff. Your concerns are well understood. You've been clear in your deputation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. For our next deputation on item 3.1, we will have Lee Benjamin and John Barker, who I believe are both here in person. If you can come forward, please.
Yes.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I am the owner of 335 Commonage Road, referred to as Lot 339. I'm not opposed to the development, and we all have a role to play in meeting the government's objective of providing housing. While recognising the importance of achieving an appropriate development yield, developers have also a responsibility to genuinely address reasonable concerns by adjoining landowners when a practical alternative exists. I am the only neighbour affected by the development of Lot 6. Other land on the southern boundary, not Lot 7 zone rule, is owned by the developer with Atkins. Good neighbours, but I differ with Mr Atkins and Urban, who've assured me of an appropriate buffer, but that did not happen. Consequently, I have concerns which respectfully I would ask you to consider. I'm aware that delays are not desirable, but the developers have had ample time to address my reasonable concerns by including a more appropriate buffer. The developer's 6 metre buffer between urban and rural zoning does not meet state government requirements, SPP 2.5 clause 5.12.5. My 7-acre rural property adjoins the 54-hectare development for just 70 metres. The DPLH has suggested 8 metres plus a 2-metre pool. That will not save the only stand of mature trees as shown in the photos in my structure plan submission item 20, nor will it adequately address the amenity or security issues covered by the above clause that will inevitably arise from such a minimal buffer. Several visits were made to my property by the DPLH, elected members and senior planners, one of whom remarked justifiably, this is a rural sanctuary. Consequently, the City of Busselton made an amendment of a minimum 20-metre buffer on all boundaries. R10 zoning is appropriate along my northern boundary. Should R20-30 be sought, then an increased buffer in accordance with rural residential interface requirements should apply. The current structure plan shows a large section of the northern boundary of Lot 7 has no buffer. The plan includes a road, reserve, and then residential R20-30. The DPLH then on my property suggested because of the impact on my northeast boundary that a 5-metre buffer plus the road would provide an adequate outcome to address amenity and security in that area for me. May I ask you, as a matter of fairness, to address my concerns? I thank you all for your work you do on behalf of the West Australian community.
Thank you very much for your deputation and for being here today. We do appreciate that, and it's useful to have you here as an adjoining landowner. Members, do you have questions of Leah in relation to her deputation today?
Thank you for your deputation. I just wanted to be clear that I understand. So this is in relation to the southern boundary of the proposed site, which currently has obviously road reserve interface, and it's about the density of that development or having a buffer. So you're open to which of those solutions would be appropriate. Is that correct?
I didn't quite hear the last bit.
Sorry, so you're seeking either a buffer in terms of open space or a lower density in terms of that interface. Is that?
No, I'm asking for a buffer, and on my boundary of 170 metres, I'm satisfied if I get a reasonable buffer and if you look at my photographs in my, you'll see the trees, and there's not a lot of trees in that area to keep those. And I'm satisfied with only R10, as they said.
Mm-hmm.
My other concern is on that northeast boundary, and the DPLH, when they came, were very good. They said that is a real issue there because on Lot 7, the other bit of the southern boundary, there's a road, and with R20-30, and that's high density, problems of lights, noise, etc. And if you read my submission, you'll notice what we affect with what we have there with trees and birds and animals, etc. And that's an issue. If we could get a 5-metre buffer, then the road on that section of Lot 7, which is still the southern boundary of the development.
Thank you.
You have the same question? Yeah. Thank you very much, Leah.
Leah. Also regarding item 3.1, we now have Dane Gaunt joining us via Zoom. So Dane, you're about to receive a panelist invite.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. We're ready when you are.
Perfect. Thank you. Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity to address you on the Lot 6 Community Structure Plan today. Rise Urban represents the Dunsborough East Land Group, comprising Argyle Royal, M Group and Fowler Group. We're preparing a structure plan for the land to the east of Lot 6 on their behalf. The proposal before you follows the recent rezoning of Lot 6. It allows for much needed new housing in Dunsborough, shifting from its previous identification for light industry. My comments are about a consequence of that shift that is directly relevant to your decision today. What happens to employment generating land for Dunsborough as Lot 6 moves off the board? The local planning strategy originally identified Lot 6 as part of the industrial and service commercial framework, and then contemplated that relocation of those functions would be addressed through a Dunsborough town site strategy. That work has not been completed. The strategy itself now predates the 2021 sub-regional framework changes, and there is no adopted citywide framework confirming where and how Dunsborough's future employment land will be provided. The agenda report acknowledges some key gaps. For example, the earlier requirement for a service commercial site and local centre at Lot 6 was removed because no commercial land supply analysis had been undertaken, and inclusion would prejudice any future investigations. Further, the department has not yet formed a view on the Dunsborough East proposal, including the provision or extent of employment land. So the concern is not about turning Lot 6 back into industrial land, and it's not about asking you to pick a different site today. We are not asking the committee to delay or refuse Lot 6. The concern is that by making Lot 6 fully urban before its strategic work is done, the planning system is removing land for jobs without first finding out where those uses should go instead. The request, therefore, is modest but important. In determining the Lot 6 structure plan, we ask that the committee recognise that employment land planning for Dunsborough is incomplete and request that this be addressed through a dedicated district-wide strategic planning process, whether via the next local planning strategy review, a Dunsborough town site strategy, or equivalent work, and for that to be brought back to the Commission or SPC. That work should identify the most suitable locations for employment land in and around Dunsborough, whether in Dunsborough East or elsewhere. That will allow decisions on future structure plans, including in Dunsborough East, to be made against a clear evidence-based employment land framework with a transparent and strategic basis for how employment land is to be provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation today, Gaunt, Dane, Mr. Gaunt. I will now go to members to see if they have any questions of you. Questions? Sorry.
Thank you, Dane. Just to clarify, so there isn't actually an objection to the structure plan as such. It's about flagging the need for that strategic work to be progressed. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I think we're taking a fairly pragmatic and rational view of the structure plan in that housing is clearly needed in Dunsborough, as is employment land. And so we didn't want to make an objection against the structure plan purely on that basis.
Thank you.
It's a helpful clarification. Thank you for that, Dane, because I think that when you put your deputation through, it did say support, and we did check in with you on that. So thanks.
Through the chair, if I may, can I ask, in terms of the work that has been done within the local planning strategy, are there other sites identified? I'm just mindful in this particular context where obviously industry is one form of employment in that particular neck of the woods, tourism, etc., are also other forms. Is there any identification in terms of what the demand profile might look like? Or is that something which I think obviously direct to the officers when they present to us?
Yeah, I think probably a question for officers. We've done some work specific to what's possible in urban development zoned land, given the objectives of that zone, but that doesn't capture all of the potential development zone type land under the scheme. So there's also industrial development zone for future industrial areas. So our work was limited to the urban development zone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I may be preempting something that the Chair is going to say. So Dane, I mean, I think you are aware that the role of the SPC today is to make the determination on this alone. And whilst those other things that you're asking us to raise as matters of concern are probably discussions for the SPC and the WAPC, they're not things to actually determine today.
Yeah, that's correct. And like I touched on before, we didn't want to formally object to the structure plan on that basis because it's recognised that the housing situation in the southwest is pretty dire, and that this does need to progress.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that recognition, and I think that the landowners that you represent have been clear about their concerns around employment land and how that's approached in consideration of your own structure plan. So I think those discussions will be as that assessment is progressing under environmental review, etc. Once through that stage, we can continue to have those conversations with you on your structure plan.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Dane? Thank you very much for your deputation today, Dane.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dane. Our next deputation, also regarding item 3.1, we have Fraser McInnes and Frank Arangio, who I believe are in person. If you can come forward, please.
Morning, guys. Yep, kick it off. So, yeah, firstly, I'd just like to thank the department officers for their engagement throughout the process, and acknowledgement of the work that has gone into assessing the proposal and modifications. The proponent supports the officer's recommendation and the modifications proposed by the department. This project has now been subject to more than 5 years of consultation and assessment. During that time, the structure plan has been extensively reviewed and refined through engagement with the City of Busselton, DPLH, environmental agencies, neighbouring landowners, the Dunsborough Reference Group and the Southwest Design Review Panel, and the broader community through the advertising period. The process has been lengthy and challenging. However, Urban Quarter has remained committed to working collaboratively with all stakeholders to address issues as they have arisen and improve the planning outcome. The structure plan before you today is a significantly refined plan which will enable delivery of a high-quality subdivision that responds to both the planning framework and the environmental values of the site. Our objective has been to create a development that responds to the unique environmental qualities of the site rather than simply imposing a conventional subdivision layout over it. One of the defining characteristics of Lot 6 is the existing vegetation and mature paddock trees. Importantly, majority of the vegetation on site has been retained with above 30% public open space provision. And the proponent also supports the strengthened environmental provisions recommended by the department, including the additional tree retention measures. We acknowledge that retaining mature paddock trees within subdivision stages presents challenges through design and engineering solutions. However, we look forward to continue to working collaboratively with the City of Busselton Engineering and Planning to maximise retention of these paddock trees. The structure plan provides for future connectivity to Dunsborough East expansion area and reflects work undertaken to respond to the transport and movement network considerations raised throughout the assessment process. Dunsborough Lakes has now been sold out for over a year and the shortage of residential land supply within the region is evident. Lot 6 represents one of the few significant opportunities available to contribute to future housing supply within that region and offers a diverse mix of housing typologies, including the group housing site identified within the structure plan. Delivery of new residential land supports the local construction industry and significant economic activity generated through the broader southwest region by home building and the associated trades. Subdivision application has been lodged for the initial stage of development with draft conditions now received, and the project has obtained EPBC approval for approximately 170 lots. Urban Quarter understands its environmental obligations, including offset and on-site environmental uplift requirements, and is committed to delivering those outcomes during the approvals process for the balance of the site. We are ready to move from planning into delivery. After more than 5 years of consultation and assessment, the structure plan before you today delivers environmental protection, future connectivity, high quality planning outcomes, and much needed housing supply. On behalf of Urban Quarter, I'd like to thank the committee for its consideration and respectfully request your support of the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser, and thank you for your time in us today and a busy agenda. I appreciate that. Thought to hear from you in relation we've heard in particular from Leah Benjamin today, who is your adjoining neighbour on the south, and her comments today about the buffer.
Yeah, no, we
and also the residential coding.
Yeah, we respect the site itself as one neighbouring landowner, which is Lee, and I've been out to her property, and they've obviously got a lovely property there adjoining lot 6. So I guess we've been working through different design treatments. In previous Dunsborough Lakes, we've had R10 dwellings which would sit flush on rural residential housing with brushwood fencing, or we've also delivered R10 lots with a 10-metre PAW and then to rural residential property. What we're proposing is a 10-metre PAW to Lee's property, or the Bingham property, but 8 metres of that would be vegetation, screened vegetation, and then we'd have a 2-metre footpath, and then the R10 properties, which deliver, from our experience, a really high quality architectural built form outcome. The price point that those lots go for, you attract a certain type of buyer, and we think that the outcome in that area, is to a really high standard. And then, given the 8-metre vegetation strip, that'll enforce further BAL setbacks on us. So any dwelling between that 8-metre vegetation strip and our first dwellings on lot 6 would still be another 30 metres away. So we think it provides ample buffer. I've been dealing with Lee's sons just on, look, this is what we're going to work towards, and we can plant that ahead of schedule. Understanding we need to have on-site uplift, and then probably just one more. Providing that PAW then really benefits the local community. You've got that pedestrian connectivity around the whole site, and then they can use that retained vegetation, the walkways through there. So, yeah, we respect Lee's request, but yeah, we think that 10-metre PAW is our design treatment for it.
Just on that, Fraser, Lee also mentioned that there are some decent trees. I know that that you're talking about installing a single row of new trees along the PAW, but do you have any comment in relation to any retention opportunities along that boundary?
Yeah, I think in this first stage of subdivision, working closely with CDP's urban design team, we've been able to work with a bit of the City of Busselton engineering team is, all right, how we can retain these paddock trees. So in further detailed design, and I think the modifications suggested as well, retaining these trees in that southern or southwestern interface to Lee's property is something that we can do, and then allowing those 1,000+ square metre properties, and the site doesn't require a whole lot of fill. We believe that we can retain some stands of trees in that area, and it really appeals to certain buyers as well if they've got a nice jarrah tree in their backyard or something like that. So I think it is in the modifications around tree retention, and we can deal with that through more detailed design for the balance of the site for that subdivision is our.
Through the chair. Hi, everybody. Look, it's not part of today's discussion, but if you look at the stage 1 application, which CDP prepared, 170 odd lots, I don't think we've ever, in my long history in consultant, gone to the depths of trying to design around trees as we have in that stage 1. So from my perspective, the developer is quite committed to ensuring as many paddock trees can be saved within the design, including within lots where possible. And Neil Fraser from the department is fairly impressed in the way we've gone about it. Our challenge, of course, will be to deal with the local engineering requirements at the Shire level. It's always the challenge, but there's a commitment. Urban Quarter will be around for the next 10 years there, and they pride on their reputation and quality of development and community outcomes. It's always difficult to balance and give everybody what they need. We'll try the best we can. So yeah, the intent is to look at detailed design as the vehicle for ensuring that some of those trees just to the north of this property can be further retained.
very much. Members, open to you for questions. Heron?
Yeah, thank you for your deputation. And I understand in terms of the PAW, I understand the design response. In terms of because obviously those properties are backing onto the PAW, is there any fencing, like what style of fencing, what's the interface and interplay intended on along that edge? Would expect to that at all, or is that
still down the track? But I'm thinking of semi-permeable fencing. But I mean, we're open to working with the city of Busselton and LDPs, and if it's brushwood fencing. But personally, I think semi-permeable fencing is what we've delivered in our recent stages of Dunsborough Lakes, which back on a 10-metre PAW. So that's what we're thinking at the moment. That'll be dealt with down the track.
Thank you. Any further members? Deputation today. Just a reminder that we have already dealt with deputations in relation to item 2.2 and determined that item.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For deputation. So our next deputation is regarding item 3.3, Precinct Structure Plan, Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan 2016, Amendment number 7. In person, we have Lena Jedgeman, David Majorana, and Eamon Ryan. If you could please come forward. Start when you are.
Dear SPC members, dear Chair, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Row Group, on behalf of various landowners listed there, would like to address the committee today with regard to the review of the Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan. Can you please change the slide? Yeah, perfect. The landowner group site is located just west of Canning Bridge, as you can see there. It is fronting Canning Highway, Sleep Road and Kisson Road. Can you please change the slide? Here we have the site on a bit of a close-up. This land parcel has a combined area of 10,600 square meters approximately, which is a significant size. It is evident that these land parcels have the potential to be redeveloped into significant scale, and they can deliver one or even multiple landmarks within the Canning Bridge Activity Centre precinct. Can you please go to the next one? Yeah. This is the site in the context of the advertised version of the CBACP. And back in 2022, when amendment number 7 was advertised, Row Group actually launched a submission on behalf of this landowner group. And the matters raised in our submission remain very much accurate in such that we believe the controls embedded in the original CBACP were appropriate and actually enabled the delivery of great build form outcomes. And now we understand that the department is recommending to include some further provisions with regard to bonus height and bonus plot ratio. Can you please change the slide? Thank you. And in the context of surrounding development, we would like to advise that our clients are generally very supportive of those recommendations made from DPLH. However, the controls for bonus height and plot ratio brought forward should not be embedded inflexibly within the CBACP. It is important to acknowledge that the potential 30 stories in height are a solid guide reflecting what's happening in the precinct today, as can be seen on this slide. This notwithstanding, a DA or a development application for anything of this magnitude will go through design review, as you're all aware, and a proposal should not be categorically limited to a maximum of 30 stories. So as to not preclude an overall design outcome that maybe on balance delivers a superior planning outcome, despite exceeding maybe 30 stories. Can you please change the slide? So to summarize, our clients are supportive of the department's recommendations, and we request the SPC to approve amendment number 7, whilst noting that this site in particular, the landowner group site, has significant potential and the controls should enable flexibility in redevelopment. Thank you, and we're open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Lena, and thank you, David and Eamon. We appreciate your deputation today, and you've been clear about how you feel about categoric limits on 30 stories, so we'll discuss that when we come to it. But members, are there any questions for Lena and the Row Group? No. I mean, look, there's obviously other deputations in writing that I'm sure you've had the opportunity to read. I don't have any questions in relation to those for you because I think that those issues have been well and truly in the report and through the process. But I know this has been a long process. I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
For our next deputation, regarding item 3 point, so part 11B, construction of residential apartments on Charles Street, North Perth. We have via Zoom Michael Hancock and Mayor Alison Zaman. Sending you panelist invites very shortly. Alison, I can see you seem to be online on 2 devices. I'll send an invite to both. Please just accept on the device you're intending to use. Thank you both. We're ready when you are.
Okay, I'll start if that's okay. So good morning. Charles Street is a transit corridor and increased residential density is contemplated in this location. The city is generally supportive of increased housing, including social and affordable housing in appropriate locations in order to meet our density targets. The city's concern at the moment is that the officer's report could be read as though the city's concerns have been resolved, but unfortunately that isn't the case. And the documents in front of you are materially the same as those originally presented to Vincent's planning teams, which is disappointing. Vincent is seeking to implement appropriate and sensitive development, and we remain concerned about the western interface and its lack of transition to the lower density residential properties to the west. Council also remains concerned about the proposed car parking shortfall, not because of the intended nature of the housing, but because the city doesn't consider the parking provision has been sufficiently justified from a planning perspective. The city requested either increased parking provisions or further evidence demonstrating that the shortfall would satisfy the relevant planning objectives, including an assessment of available on-screen parking capacity, but unfortunately no such assessment has been undertaken. The community has raised concerns about whether future occupants would be eligible for residential or visitor parking permits. The city's recommended advice included wording confirming that these permits would not be issued, but that doesn't appear to have been included in the recommended approval either. Tree retention, of course, always remains relevant, noting Council's concern that mature tree removal should only be supported where retention has been properly explored. So the city is asking the SPC to give proper weight to Council's advice and the suggested modifications. The city's preferred outcome is that the application be deferred to allow the western interface and associated parking matters to be resolved before determination, but our planning manager for planning, Michael Hancock, can elaborate further.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman, and thank you, SPC members, for the opportunity to make a deputation. So, as the Mayor indicated, the site is located on Charles Street, which is within a transit corridor, and the city accepts that increased density is contemplated in this location. We also acknowledge that the City of Vincent's Design Review Panel and the State's Design Review Panel comments overall quite positive on the development and the architectural response. The primary unresolved issue is the western interface. This boundary directly interfaces with low-density 2-storey group dwellings within an R20 coded area. Council's adopted position was that the revised plan should demonstrate a materially improved upper-level transition to this interface. This could be achieved through a stepped height form, an increased floor setback, or an equivalent design modification that better responds to the adjoining low-density context. Based on the plans before the committee, that matter has not been resolved. The plans remain materially the same in relation to the western interface and do not provide the clearer transition sought by Council. The city also remains concerned about the proposed car parking shortfall. The proposal provides 33 resident bays and 3 visitor bays, where the ARCOs would require 45 resident bays and 8 visitor bays. Council requested either increased parking provision or further evidence demonstrating that the shortfall would satisfy the relevant planning objectives, including an assessment of available on-street parking capacity and measures to manage resident and visitor parking demand. The SDAU report accepts the shortfall on the basis of the site's transit corridor location, access to public transport, walkability, and alternative transport options. Those are relevant conditions. However, neither the report nor the TIS appears to provide a detailed survey of available on-street parking capacity in the locality. Importantly, in recognition of this, the city had recommended an advice note that confirms future occupants and visitors would not be issued with either residential or visitor parking permits. This was intended to respond to community concerns about overflow parking onto the surrounding streets. Unfortunately, that advice note does not appear to have been included in the recommended approval. The city acknowledges that many of its standard technical conditions have been incorporated. However, key matters identified by council, particularly in relation to the western interface and the car parking, have not been resolved. For that reason, the city respectfully requests that the committee defer the application to allow the western interface and associated parking matters to be further resolved before determination. If the committee is minded to approve the application, the city requests that the parking permit advice note be included. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Zamon and Michael, for your deputation today. It's Emma Cole speaking to you now. I do note your request for the advice note on parking permits, and I had intended to ask you about that to make sure that that position was still in place, that where you do see new multi-dwelling development, that you do not issue car parking permits. So we'll raise that issue when we come to the discussion. I'll now see whether members have any questions for you. Thank you, Commissioner Herron.
Thank you very much for your deputation. In terms of the western interface, I'm just wanting to understand further. I mean, obviously, the design review process has supported the interface situation, and there's no balconies or whatever onto. Is there a particular issue around the western interface that you're seeking to have addressed, or is it just the fact that there's 4 stories interface?
Thank you, committee member. So I understand that the state's design review panel was supportive of the western setbacks. However, the city's design review panel was still supportive, but less so. And we haven't got an issue with the additional height that's been proposed. However, from our perspective, that additional height isn't set back in the context of recognizing the neighboring dwellings and the proximity of those setbacks. So we are supportive of that extra height. We just believe that further setbacks could result in a better outcome for the western neighbours.
Thank you. Through the chair, can I also then ask, in relation to the parking situation, and I understand the notion in terms of the advice note being sought, is there any specific elements around why you consider the existing provision to be insufficient? I mean, there has been some evidence, particularly around, and although this is not specifically to social housing, but around apartment occupancy, etc., which is articulated in the report around lower dwelling usage. I was just wondering, I suppose it's quid pro quo in terms of, is there particular evidence which the city has which expresses the concern or articulates the extent of concern which exists?
Unfortunately, not specifically in this instance. So the city undertakes quite impressive car parking or on-street car parking demand surveys on a fairly regular basis. Unfortunately, we do not have up-to-date figures for this particular area, which has partly informed our recommended condition back to the department. So we haven't got the evidence to demonstrate whether there is sufficient capacity in the surrounding streets for the additional parking. That matter aside, recognising that Charles Street is a transit corridor and is anticipating greater development, high density development into the future, and this really is one of the in the context of how long Charles Street is, one of the more early cabs off the rank, so to speak. And should developments progressively have such potentially substantial car parking shortfalls, that will place increased pressure onto the surrounding streets. Noting Charles Street itself doesn't provide on-street parking, and the only option for on-street locations would be the surrounding residential street. So we are open to car parking variations where sufficient evidence has been provided. However, in this instance, we didn't have that evidence to support the variation.
I think we get that. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Michael, is the surrounding local streets subject to restricted parking?
Various streets do have some restrictions. That is currently being reviewed and extended along Sydney Street in particular. But yes, there are some restrictions in place.
We've got some parking restrictions in place working in tandem with a lack of parking permits provided for this development. So if there is going to be parking associated, it would need to be short-term incidental, not long-term resident parking.
That's correct, within the restrictions, which on some days there are no restrictions. So potentially some days there could be, I guess, if you consider long-term all day, then potentially all day on some days.
And if that does become an issue, the city then has the ability to respond.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for the city? Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you both. For our next deputation, also regarding item 3.4, we have a mixture of in-person and online presenters. In person, we have Jackie Hall, Ben Doyle, Sam Klopper, and Stian Stutlian. If you can please come forwards, and I'll invite online we have Anne Brower. Is receiving a panelist invitation, and Scott Lambie likewise, if you can both.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, SPC members and DPLH officers. My colleague Ben Doyle and I from Planning Solutions and the project architects from Buckle Davis are here this morning representing the applicant in support of the proposed residential development at 407 to 409 Charles Street, North Perth. We're pleased to receive the SDAU's report and recommendation to approve this application, subject to conditions, and we thank the officers at DPLH for their collaboration and engagement throughout the application process. The development proposes a built form scale reflective of the desired future character of Charles Street as a transit corridor suitable for medium to high density housing. The building has been designed with consideration for the site's residential neighbours, particularly those to the west. Among other initiatives, the building successfully steps away from the majority of the western boundaries and as a result only occupies 50% of the western setback. In summary, the proposal provides low cost, well-designed housing in an excellent location with access to transport and amenities. We'd like to propose two changes to the conditions included in the SDAU's report. These relate to condition 2 of part A and condition 8 of part B as outlined in the summary. I understand that committee members have been provided. We respectfully ask the committee to approve the application and resolve to amend.
Thank you. It might be a good opportunity. Perhaps Sam could take this question on the Western interface.
Yep, sure. And I did want to sort of comment on that. We originally went to the City of Vincent to talk to their DRP and then changed direction to SDA really for procedural reasons. The original DRP made comment about the Western interface, and indeed the drawings have reference to that as the original DRP. A lot of the conversations with both the state and the city's DRP was about diagrams explaining different forms and outcomes. So as with any development application, the beauty and poetry of the building slowly gets stripped away as we talk more and more about planning. But I did a series of studies about this, and I was quite determined not to do a stepped and staggered building form. I was very strongly of the opinion that social housing, affordable housing means effectively you've got to build it cheap, and we're selling this to the state. So it's about being economical, and transitions and swaps and shifts out of a building form create waterproofing issues, and they also create interface issues, and they're more expensive. So my focus is to do beautiful buildings economically. It would be easier for me to make those steps, and I deliberately chose not to. And through a series of diagrams which were explained to the panelists and supported, a narrower building which is only adjacent to the site for one half of its length, and the location of it was a much better outcome than something that could have been all the way along the boundary. Indeed, in R60, we're permitted to do on the boundary to 7 metres for a series of 14 metres with a 3 metre break. So
compared to a permitted building form, which would have had a much stronger and more impactful impact on the neighbours, we considered this to be the right way to proceed. And the building moved away as well as got narrower through that process, which went to the SDRP. So there's probably a little bit of conversation that was lost between the two panels.
Thank you. Members? Member Harmon?
Thank you, Chair. My question was more in relation to the social housing component. What arrangement is there, or is there an arrangement that's sort of formalised being delivered as social housing? Because it's sort of the applicant report touches on it in quite a lot of detail, but the applicant report doesn't.
The intention is for low cost housing. There's no confirmation between our client and Department of Housing at this stage that we can confirm what if it's social or either of the two, but that is the long-term intent. We just cannot age.
There's the state is the purchaser within on Globo, so it'll be up to them.
So that arrangement's in place.
Yeah, the arrangement's in place because the ink's not on the paper and all that. It would not be appropriate for us to say this is social housing. So, but it is designed for that purpose. The Department of Housing Works owns half of the site. The intent is for it to be that. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Herron? Thank you. In terms of the parking things, which is obviously a pertinent component, and whether you're able to speak to any of the rationale in terms of the quantum that is currently being proposed, as well as the fact if you could speak to the intended management regime in terms of, is it going to be a first come first serve basis? Will there be bays allocated to particular dwellings? Is there any insights you're able to provide in that regard?
The parking rate proposed in our view is appropriate considering the high frequent public transport along Charles Street. There's a bus stop right out front of our site, as well as the site's well serviced by footpaths that you can walk to key services. So living at the site wouldn't necessarily require a car. In terms of the allocation of parking bays, I don't think that's
they're not
confirmed.
allocated specifically. They've effectively you can consider them to be all available. So it depends on the use as it goes through the building. So it's not. But there are studies that we've talked about the uses of this building and the cars they use, which is way below what we require. But in order to give them flexibility, what do they want to have?
Sorry, did you say that there is a study that has been done, or
no? There is a series of projects that have been approved as pure social housing, which have lower numbers than that. So we felt comfortable with the state wasn't comfortable with committing to those lower numbers and chose this yield. But I did want to sort of talk to the City of Vincent, which has been one of the most progressive councils in the state. I've worked with them through their DRP when I was a panelist there. They're redrafting a lot of their policies and their controls to remove all of those largely redundant parking controls. So I think they fundamentally understand the transition away from the need for one car per unit. And I think where this has been a way to sort of prove that through the development we're doing. And I think doing it this way, it's been hard to get people to develop buildings without one bay per unit because of retail side. So we think this is a good opportunity to prove that it would.
Thank you.
Just to close that one out, if I may. The report, importantly, the report, although we don't agree, the report states that this should be assessed at the R60 code and that it requires the exercise of discretion for that purpose. But the parking has been assessed under volume 2 of the R codes. If it were assessed under volume 1, which would apply if it was R60, then there is no parking required dwellings at that depth. And so in fact, it would be deemed to comply in terms of the overall parking requirement. And just to address the issue raised by the City of Vincent in relation to street parking, our intent and the expectation is not to rely on street parking for residents. And the city has made it clear, and it's a standard condition that they put on, that a resident parking permit will not be granted. That being the case, there didn't seem to be any point in doing a parking survey of the available parking in the surrounding area because we weren't going to be entitled to use it anyway under the city's regime. So that overall, I guess we've got a fair bit of data now that shows that the parking supply is appropriate for this form of development and the nature of the use. It can be controlled by the instruction to the tenants who live there, expectations around that. So in our view, it's appropriate for this location.
Thank you. Through the chair, I suppose that was where I was going. Is there any objection that the proponents have in relation to the proposed advice note about the no parking permits is one part? I'm taking that as that there's no issue. But the second part of that is I sort of say, I think it is important that we start to collate the data so that have no issues with reduced parking. It's just that there will be constant discussion and debate. And the more that we can have that rational discussion, I think the easier it is. I would ask, however, whether consideration was given to additional provisions of alternative transport. And by that, I do mean things like scooters and even gophers and the like, because I mean, there will be a range of residents. Or was consideration given to provision of that? And or do you feel that the design is robust enough that that can be accommodated?
Yeah, absolutely. We've exceeded the number of bikeways required. There's open spaces on the northern side of the building in excess of the requirements for communal space and also for deep soil. So there's opportunities probably to place those things in. Unfortunately, a lot of those plug-in devices have a whole bunch of regulatory controls. So as much as I would love to say and have in the past, but been slapped on the hand by electrical consultants, it's difficult to commit exactly where they can go because they typically have to be charged within the sole occupancy unit. But should we be able to process, there's lots of opportunities within the building space for that.
Thank you.
Just on that matter of parking, it is the case that we've dealt with some recent social housing developments at the SPC, for example, a Development WA application for Park Lane in Bassendean. We did look at parking ratios for social housing, and that case was put in terms of the ratio being lower. I did speak to our assessing officers about this, and they've said that because this, the land use is multiple dwelling, they haven't presented that same information in the report, but we're noting that the intent is for this to be social affordable, and that there are studies around what these ratios look like, but haven't been presented on this occasion because of the nature of the application.
I think it's pretty important to sort of state that we design homes. We don't really focus on their use. I think there are some considerations to width, corridors, and spaces to break out, and moments to access through different avenues, which are talking to the end user. But I'm very passionate about the idea of creating just beautiful homes for people and not focusing. I think people get caught up in rabbit holes talking about what they need as a kind of preconception. I think we just need homes. And we think there's good evidence to make this work without those sorts of justifications about the end user.
Thank you. You've raised % for art. I just was interested to understand whether you see an opportunity to have the % for art on site, given some of the constraints that you've outlined, or whether you'd be, if the condition is retained, whether you'd be looking at making a contribution in place of on-site % for art.
We're happy to engage with that. Depends a bit on timing, a lot of that. My client, which is good news for the state, is in a bit of a hurry. So we're currently documenting with all the risks of this building. So we sometimes get caught with those requirements because we are ready to build this thing and we don't have an artist selected. So which is why we try and separate those things. And we also think that art can be delivered in a lot of different ways, and it doesn't necessarily have to be directly to the building. So there's avenues to still add benefit to the community without it being bolted to our building. We see value in ephemeral art and place art. It doesn't have to be something we stick on.
I'll just add to that. The preference is to remove the condition, given the intended end user as affordable housing. Any development contribution will add to the flow on cost to the end user, and kind of as Sam mentioned, the mid-block location is limited area for the art to be provided on site, and we illustrate as a transit corridor with cars driving past the site. Any public art provided might not be as visible as it would be if the site was in a town centre with the public domain and interface.
Thank you. Any further questions? You asked one. Oh, sorry. All right, thank you very much for your deputation today.
Well, and to those on as well. Expectation regarding item 3.5, so part 11B development application, development, Bay Court, Champion Lakes. We have Greg Wallace, Darren Bowes, who are in person. Please come forwards. When you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Committee members, I act for the owners of lot 9000, and I'm sitting here with Darren Bowes, who is a project manager on that project. That's the subdivision directly to the south of the proposed lifestyle village. I can't sit here and suggest to you that the Part 11B process is limited in terms of its available discretion. I'm not going to do that. But what I can tell you that discretion isn't automatic. There is some heavy lifting involved. But what I want to focus on is what an applicant would need to do in order to enliven that discretion, what has been done and what that means for you. In my view, what an applicant needs to do in the context of a matter like this is either align its project with the planning framework, and more specifically the structure plan relevant to Lake Road Precinct B, and align it in terms of its density and the provision of public connector roads throughout it. But secondly, if it wanted to depart from that, it would either have to obtain a structure plan amendment to deal with those changes, or engage with my client or the city in order to identify a solution for the already approved and substantially commenced subdivision to the south, or advance a cogent reason to apply some flexibility to your discretion. Instead, what the applicant has done here is not chosen to pursue a structure plan amendment on the basis that it's a fairly lengthy process. I understand that. And instead, they have put forward a design that effectively abandons the plans for the connected roads to the south, and in particular lot 9000, rely on a private internal road network instead, and assume that lot 9000 can simply be retrofitted with cul-de-sacs and altered road geometry, despite the fact it's already approved. That is not a cogent reason to depart. What we're left with is a solution, and I use the parenthesis for that word, that is left to an independent third party, i.e. the owner of lot 9000, and effectively means that the ultimate solution is something that is imposed on somebody else, is a condition that cannot be imposed by this committee, and may result in a situation where the land, which is currently under a temporary easement, would need to be acquired either by the commission or the city. What that means for your discretion, as you understand, your discretion is set out in section 171R of the Planning and Development Act, and amplified by clause 67. What that means of the deemed provisions, what that means is that you need to give proper, genuine, realistic consideration to the structure plan, my client's subdivision approval, the relationship with the adjoining land, and also the amenity of the adjoining land. Exercise of discretion in a manner that doesn't consider the context of orderly and proper planning or disciplined, logical, methodical, systematic thinking is not appropriate. Here, what the applicant is effectively asking you to do is apply flexibility without any cogent reasoning to justify significant departure from the planned movement network and the land use pattern. In those circumstances,
you are now over time.
Beg your pardon.
I've also had the benefit of your written submission, and we can ask you questions.
Thank you.
Just wanted to point out that the report does state that the application is capable of being determined under existing planning framework and is not enlivening 171R for this particular application.
Clause 67 still applies.
Yes, yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So look, thank you for your written deputation as well. We've talked about the access points and you talked about the fact that it affects, so I just have to open it up. I think it was around 9 lots.
It's 6 lots.
Lots, my apologies, but if you could please speak specifically to that issue of the impact that.
Yes, the financial and practical impact.
Well, just in terms of the fact that you say in your submission that you have gone through the subdivision application process and that this now affects the 6 lots in question, if you could just outline the impact in some.
I'll frame it, but in terms of the practical impacts, this is obviously a subdivision that's been approved with 2 access legs and a north-south. The consequence of applying for conditions is that there needs to be arrangements made for traffic movements and in particular truck movements for refuse collection. What that invariably means is that arrangements have to be made for cul-de-sac heads within the lot boundary. Those cul-de-sac heads are evident on the eastern side of the lot, but you will see that there's a temporary road along the top, the northern part of the block, which effectively allows for those traffic movements to occur.
Temporary.
That arrangement effectively means that the ability to title the lots in that location is not available. So there's I think from memory 5 lots that are affected across the top. It also means that there needs to be an easement in play over what is ostensibly private land, and for that easement, if this application is approved, to persist in perpetuity, which is it's not an ideal situation. It's not an ideal situation for private landowners to own roads.
Well, not only roads, like a balanced title, so be treated as a lot yearly for taxation, land tax, accounting fees to keep the company alive, perpetuity. So only intended to be temporary until the neighbouring land extended the roads. So those 4 lots, it's actually 4 lots, to be clear, that are along the boundary or adjacent to the property that would be created once those 3 roads are extended. That's perfectly fine.
Okay. Thank you. Look, this is a matter that we will come to and discuss when we come to deliberate the item. But members, do you have any questions, particularly on this matter? Thank you. Yes, Aaron.
Thank you through the chair. In your deputation, I do note obviously the plan that is provided, find a reference point, but essentially the plan of the DA site sort of does show the road reserve section and cul-de-sac head, providing for obviously the cul-de-sac head for one of the roads. So yes, so can I just be clear then that in terms of the properties affected, it's the proposed 835 and 836, because I'm assuming 825 and 819 would no longer be affected. Is that
the answer is obviously the city will determine that, because we have that's a negotiation for the city. Sure. They have to lift their easement. And then be satisfied that the truck movement over those 2 lots, which the 2 you're mentioning as an 836 and 835, that's sufficient to be able to collect the rubbish from 825.
Sure, and again, there's further discussion to be had. I just wanted to again to focus the discussion. The Blaze Away cul-de-sac head is provided for in the development application. So therefore, again, the focus of discussion and deliberation should be in relation to those other 2 sites. Is that a reasonable?
There's other 3 lots, of which one is possible to be created if the city determine that, but there's 2 specifically that can't be serviced with the current plan as per next door. That's correct.
Understood. Thank you.
But we did get some late information come through in response to a question on this item, and we'll flesh it out in detail when we come to the item. But I think that the advice back to which we'll go through in detail, is that that as Commissioner Heron has mentioned, it's coming down to the 2 lots, and the advice coming back is that there is a way to ensure that yield can be delivered. So we can explore that in on the item. Are there any other questions, please? Thank you very much.
For our next application, also regarding item 3.5, have in person Clayton Plug, Jade Slate, and Leah Butler. If you could please come forwards.
Morning, Chairperson and fellow committee members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you about this one today. I've got three main topics I'd like to discuss, so I'm just going to work through those sequentially. If I could have the next slide. Firstly, our client does have a long proven track record of delivering and managing an exceptional lifestyle village in Champion Lakes. The current village represents, I think, more than 170 homes with a pretty low turnover rate given high resident satisfaction. Our client does maintain their own building team, which is important to this application because they've been delivering homes over 3 stages with the latest nearing completion. And so this 4th stage before you is going to be constructed by that same team. And so their learned efficiencies in that process ensure that the homes that they're building in this particular stage can be delivered in around 14 weeks from slab down. Therefore, the proposal is going to help address the very strong demand in this locality for the stock. Our clients currently turning away multiple couples a week who are inquiring about housing opportunities. Unfortunately, many in tears given the existing market conditions before them. So this proposal is critical in addressing that shortfall. And it's also going to, of course, free up additional housing for young families and couples when people move into the village elsewhere. Next slide, please. We'd like to also just highlight some of the landscaping qualities that are pretty inherent to this design. Specifically, our clients sought to retain the existing line of trees that runs between the current village and the proposed stage. You can see some of the trees on the image there, and they're all pretty much the same height across that run. This, along with the proposed landscaping measures that are put forward throughout the village, including tree planting opportunities in front of all the dwellings, just ensures a very high level of livability for this future community and their own private space in which to reside within the vegetation being retained there. Next slide, please. Lastly, I'd like to discuss some of the planning technicalities which we've been hearing about this morning, particularly around the structure plan and the access arrangements. So in this structure plan, it does propose a linear public open space section that you can see running through the middle of the site there. We're though proposing this to be communal open space, and the reason for that's twofold. Firstly, it does provide our clients' residents with a private and safe space to enjoy, and second, it allows for appropriate bushfire management to ensure that our yield can be maintained so that we can deliver this critical housing while ensuring the ground level is maintained in an appropriate fashion. Finally, just in respect of the subdivision next door and its vehicular access, we do agree with the comments in the agenda report entirely. In respect of the other submitted comments and what we've heard today, we do note that the WPC did issue that party an approval that didn't require turnaround points at those road ends. It was their choice to resolve this through road connections that cost them the 4 lots that we're talking about. They could have accommodated cul-de-sac heads to achieve that. The lot sizes were of sufficient nature to do that. And that is a suggestion that I made with them at the time. So yeah, we think we've been pretty accommodating and allowing at least one of the cul-de-sac heads in our land. We're sort of talking about 2 lots today. Last slide just shows the current village. Yeah, do thank you very much for your time today.
Very much, Clayton, Jade and Leah, for your deputation today. Yes, we were interested in the access arrangements points made by the previous deputy, so thank you for responding to that. Members, are there other questions that you wish to ask? No other questions? Thank you very much for your deputation.
Well, for our next deputation regarding item 3.6, part 11B development application, 930 Albany Highway, Eastwick Park. Robert Cruikshank, who I believe is in person with us. Come forward. Joining online, actually, sorry. Robert, you're receiving a panelist invite at the moment. Robert, I'll resend that if you could please accept it when it comes through. Not seeing any movement. I'll give Rob a quick call just to. So would you like to proceed to the next step?
I think so. And just to be clear, it has been helpful in relation to this deputation to have the benefit of a detailed written submission. So that, you know, that does provide a very good overview of the issues that the town wishes to raise. So in the absence of Robert being present or answering the phone, I think.
He's getting a phone call.
Oh, you are? We'll give him opportunity if he's there.
All right, this is Jonathan, just calling from today's SPC meeting. Are you able to join as a panelist? Okay, I can see you in the attendee list. I'm able to issue the invite, but I believe it'll be a notification that pops up on your screen. Okay. That's okay. I've got an option to just click allow to talk if that works. There's nothing popping up on your end.
Does he want to provide his deputation over the telephone on speaker?
I can put you on speakerphone as a stopgap measure if you like. Okay, I'll do that now. Okay, thank you, Robert. You should be able to everyone be heard.
Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Robert. Go ahead. Yes, Robert, can you go ahead, please?
Apologies, sorry, thank you. The town's very disappointed to understand the DA's recommended for refusal. There are many compelling reasons to not do so, which are outlined in my deputation.
You've been recommended for approval.
Recommended for approval. Sorry, I've been thrown a little bit by the technology.
No problem.
Apologies, sorry.
That's fine.
So first of all, at considerable time, effort and cost and extensive community engagement, the town's progressed the Albany Highway Precinct Structure Plan to a point that its approval is imminent, only a few weeks away. Despite that, on the first occasion that the imminent planning framework is applied to a DA, it is being set aside in favour of a development proposal which is not aligned with the desired built forms. On the matter of built form controls, the officer's report characterises the discretion as being largely issues of plot ratio and building height, but as I've outlined in my presentation, it's much more extensive than that, and cumulatively the number of variations being proposed and the extent of variations indicates further development of the site. We have a plot ratio that's 47% more than the new planning framework. We have a building height which is over by 1 story. We have buildings, a building which doesn't comply with the required setback of buildings above the podium level. We have a building facing Terminus Lane which has no podium at all. It's just a 9-story rise. Street setbacks don't comply for the levels above the podium, 37% reduction for 6 levels. We have side setbacks, a requirement of 4 metre minimum. We have 1.5 metre minimum setbacks proposed, a 62% reduction. Basically, every primary control within the proposed PSP is proposed to be varied, some marginally, some significantly, but cumulative result of different built form to that being proposed. There's nothing that's been said in the SDRP comments or the DPLH officer's comments that indicate or imply that there are any elements of design excellence which would warrant the discretion being granted. The SDOP in themselves made comments about unresolved design issues, particularly the scale and bulk of the building, and it was said that that needed to be mitigated through further articulation. It seems that there's been no meaningful response to those comments other than some cosmetic changes to the design treatment rather than changes to the building form. To echo the submission made by Mr. Wallace earlier in a separate item, the SPC must have due regard to the proposed structure plan, but there can be flexibility in applying the provisions where it's a case to do so. In my professional opinion, three things. There are no cogent reasons to depart from the imminent new planning framework to the significant extent proposed. Compared to the existing planning scheme and framework, the new framework already allows for more intensified development. But what is the basis to approve variations which are so far and above beyond the new framework when it delivers alternative built form outcomes? Secondly, it would not be consistent with orderly and proper planning principles to approve a DA that varies significant key built form controls of an imminent PSP that's gone through a significant preparatory work and community consultation exercise. And my last point, three, the new planning framework clearly articulates the desired built form for the locality. With respect, there's nothing that has been presented that justifies how the development can be considered to be consistent with the desired built form for the locality. My opinion is clearly not, and approval would set an alternative built form precedent to that envisaged by the PSP. Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much. Thanks for accommodating the IT difficulties today. We do appreciate that that's not ideal, and we appreciate your flexibility there. We do appreciate that you've had the opportunity to give us this verbal deputation, and we have had a bit of your written submission as well, which is detailed. So thank you for that. Members, do you have any questions for Robert? Robert, perhaps one question I did want to just ask you your thoughts on is that the report does talk about the podium being one story to Terminus Lane in the report. You don't seem to agree with that. Would you like to comment on that on that idea of podium at Terminus Lane being one story?
No, I guess from my reading of the drawings, it's a 9-story building that goes straight up at Terminus Lane. I mean, it does at the upper levels have balconies that sit forward of the, I guess, the main building form, the main building wall. But no, it's a building going up 9 stories at the Terminus Lane frontage.
Okay, thank you. And the other question was really, there was just that conditioning around the laundry and kitchen facilities, which did come up during briefing. Can you just outline your concern there?
Sorry, could you draw my attention to that's a condition of a recommended condition?
It's in relation to the separation of laundry facilities and kitchens, and the town has a specific provision around that.
I've got to say, in hearing for today, have not turned my mind to that matter. I can only suggest it was a comment of our environmental health team about the town's health local law. So
it did seem a little bit curious to us, so I just thought I'd ask the question on if this is something that's a strongly held position by the town.
I think in the context of my submission today, that's a minor consideration.
Thank you for that. Members, any further questions? Thank you very much for your deputation today, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Just ending the call. Okay. For our next deputation, also regarding item 3.6, we have Alan Stewart and Simon Walker joining us online. And Simon, you're both going to panelist invite. Hopefully we're more successful with this one. Looks like we're getting there. Right, just a case of unmuting and turning on your cameras, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're ready when you are.
Can I just
Thank you very much.
Before you start, Alan, it's Emma Cole speaking to you. Can I just ask, were you able to hear Robert Cruikshank's deputation then?
Yes. Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'll try to be quite brief on this. I did send some diagrams with my written deputation request, which you may have in front of you. So just in terms of site context, I think it's important to note that this part of Albany Highway has been underutilised for a very long time. And this site itself, I couldn't find any record of previous development in the last 60 years. And I think in response to some of Robert's comments, it's really important to know the topography here. The land rises by 7 metres from Albany Highway to Terminus Lane, and then a further 4 metres up to Hubert Street to the rear. So that topography has a big implication on the design of this building and how we've arranged a lot of the setbacks and car parking, etc. The area to the rear, it's occupied by entirely of 2 to 3 story flat developments built in the 1960s and 1970s, all of which simply have bitumen hard stand parking at the rear of our property. But in terms of moving forward, it is a mixed-use zone. It's opposite a district centre zoning, and it's in the Albany Highway Precinct Plan, which you're aware of. We were hoping that precinct plan may well have been considered by the Commission prior to today. I understand it is imminent in terms of being presented to yourselves. We're very aware of the contents of that precinct plan. We made a submission during advertising, and that resulted in the sub-area EE3 provisions, which apply to this strip of land along Albany Highway from Dane Street to Somerset Street. We certainly have not disregarded that precinct plan, quite the opposite. We've had really close due regard to the objectives and many of the provisions of that precinct plan. Yes, there are some variations to do with some of those primary controls, but we do not say that anywhere near as significant as the time suggests. Just in terms of the design itself, we've been through 4 DRPs throughout this journey, the most 2 recent ones being State Design Review Panel, but we did present an original proposal to the Times DRP and their chair, and that resulted in the design evolving from a single tower building through to the 2 towers, and then with some further tweaking and adjustment to those 2 tower building heights. The main benefit of that is that we do achieve the objective of the precinct plan, whereby the heights transition up from Hubert Street towards Albany Highway. With that difference in topography, there's only about a 2-story difference between the potential 5-story buildings on Hubert Street to our proposed 9-story building on the property, because of that almost 3-story difference in height across the area. The 2-tower approach allows us to get some really nice cross ventilation through all of the apartments, much improved solar access to the apartments as well as adjoining properties. And it also means that we've addressed a lot of visual privacy concerns. In terms of those building setbacks, it's not the whole building. It seeks setback variations to the side boundaries. It's limited to some elements of the 2 buildings, and then we have a very generous gap between the 2 buildings, which greatly help with mitigating the perceived bulk and scale of this building, which will stand there by itself for a short time until other properties are developed. In terms of the design, it's a lightweight architectural treatment. We've worked
Alan,
very hard
sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. I've been quite strict on deputies today.
You
with
have.
timing, given that we've got a really long meeting, and we have had a lot of deputies. So in fairness, I probably do need to stop you there. You have had some additional time, but we will ask you questions.
That's
So,
fine. Thank you. I just finished anyway. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and look, I would like to ask you about the extent of podium. That is a question that I would like to ask you. So if you could please speak to that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Look, the precinct plan talks about a 3-story podium, which I can't recall if it applies only to Albany Highway or to both street frontages, because Terminus Lane is actually a gazetted road. At the Albany Highway frontage, we have a 4-story podium. And if you did get my diagrams attached to my deputation request, I did highlight that the 4th level of that podium, it's really only limited to, the first sort of 8 to 10 metres of building for the front 2 apartments. The podium itself then is clearly set back from the side boundaries behind that. And we introduced landscaping and set back the balconies to really play down the scale of that podium. Fronting Terminus Lane, I mean, you know, what is a podium? We say there is a podium, a single-story podium, because above that, the upper floor building facade is set back a little bit from the lower floor fronting Terminus Lane. But, you know, with a sort of a height of 3-story difference across the site, it's quite difficult to get a uniform height podium from front to back on this property.
Yep, thank you. Members, other questions for the deputation? Thank you. Go ahead, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Alan, you touched on it earlier in terms of the topography of the site, and I assume that's part of the reason that a lot of the parking, there's sort of a semi-basement, right? There's a lot of the parking is above ground rather than going deeper into the basement. Was there a reason that you didn't go deeper, for want of a better term? Was it feasibility driven?
Yeah, that's a very good question. From day one on this project and a previous project I worked on this site as well, it was made clear that access to parking from Albany Highway would not be supported. And I fully agree with that as a planner. I think access on Terminus Lane is where to have it. The problem is when you bring in a ramp or a driveway entry off Terminus Lane, it's a long way down to a basement, and you simply could not do it for cost as well as the practicality of fitting in ramps and that type of thing. So the approach taken was 2 levels of parking, each of a single lane wide entry ramp off Terminus Lane, and they're at levels 1 and 2 in the podium. So they're fully screened behind the ground and street fronting tenancies and apartments to make sure they're not visible from the street. But we think it's a good solution to the topography of the site, because you could not go down into a basement if you're coming off Terminus Lane. It's simply not. And Simon, the architect's here as well, if he needs to elaborate. But so that was the approach we took in terms of the parking location on the site.
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, sorry, I'm a designer, by the way, not an architect, I should say. Yeah, you simply lose too much space in getting down below into the basement. And this site, to even become functional, is excavating 2 stories down into ground at risk and at a huge cost. So the result is we've got our car parking effectively set away from the street between both street levels, addressing the best way we can some very difficult topography.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. This may be for both of you, Alan and Simon, but the town, I suppose, not unreasonably, are feeling a little aggrieved that they have such a new position statement, or not position statement, precinct plan, in place that's about to be adopted, and yet these are variations to it. They have put the position that no argument has been made to make those variations. Would you like to address that briefly?
Well, first of all, I disagree, because we've submitted a very comprehensive submission that provides I believe, very solid justification for the variations that are proposed by this proposal. I don't think they are as significant as perhaps Robert may have alluded to. It's a 1-story variation in height, I agree, but the overall, it's not just about height and plot ratio in itself. You need to look at the overall design approach that we've taken here, which is to split the bulk into the 2 separate buildings above the podium to really break up those facades, the side elevations. And in terms of articulation and detailing, we've worked very hard to reduce the perceived and actual height of the podium and the tower elements. They step up, and I think importantly, the objective of this sub area is to manage a transition in height upwards from Hubert Street towards Albany Highway, which we say we do very well. And even at our proposed 9 stories, it's only about 2 stories more than what could be developed under the precinct plan on the land to the rear.
Is that
Sorry?
2 meters? 2 meters, do you mean, Alan? You said 2
No,
stories.
no. If the land behind us were developed to 5 stories, as per the precinct plan.
I see.
Oh, my
It's
apologies.
actually only about the difference of about 2 stories when you look at it, because of the contours and the topography in this area. Because Hubert Street's much higher again than our property. And there was a comment about plot ratio. I mean, I made the comment in our submission during advertising of the precinct plan that the plot ratio was simply not aligned with the heights. And we've ended up with a plot ratio which is pretty much exactly what I guessed it would be 2 years ago or a year ago when we did the submission. But we would ask you to look at the overall design approach, and what efforts we've done to mitigate things like impacts on streetscape and open scale. And I think that's something that came through quite strongly through the state design review panel process that we went through.
Yeah, and certainly when we were initially engaged with the Town of Vic Parks design review panel, they drew us away from a single mass building of similar scale, which would arguably overshadowed its neighbours, had much more difficult solar and ventilation issues. It was an altogether worse result, I think. So following the initial town advice to break into the 2 towers has delivered a better outcome, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Well, thank you for the deputation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that does conclude our verbal deputations, and I just would like to note that we have had quite a number of written deputations as well. Across item 3.1, we've had 4 on item 3.3, 4 on item 3.4, 1 on item 3.5 and 3.6, and 2 on item 4.1, which we have already withdrawn from the agenda today. So members, before we move to consideration of the items, I am going to have to request a 5-minute break. We have had Swan Valley before this meeting, so I do just need to be very quick and have a short break. I don't have Deputy Chair to hand over to. So if we could reconvene at 12:30, that's 4 minutes.
Right.
at the moment.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome back to the meeting. We are now going to deal with the non-confidential items that we have not already considered. We have considered 3.2 earlier in the meeting. So the first item that we're dealing with is item 3.1, City of Busselton Lot 6 Community Road Structure Plan. And Martin Hughes and Mark Jendrzak are joining us online. Martin and Mark, we've had deputations today, which we've listened into. Do you wish to make any comments in response to those deputations or raise any key matters? We are, we are sort of probably needing to move to questions quite quickly. So if you could keep it to the key matters.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I'll respond very quickly, and then Mark and I can answer any questions. But in terms of landscape impacts, we note the community's concerns. It's addressed in the report comprehensively. In regards to State Planning Policy 6.1, Commonage Road is identified as a travel route corridor. Various rural roads within the City of Boston are designated as this, including Commonage, Biddle, Wildwood, and Caves Road. Other structure plans in these areas have included landscape buffers and development setbacks, which is consistent with the approach taken for this structure plan. In regards to lot 339, the department met landowners on site, and modifications are recommended to address this, including an 8-meter buffer, and also modifications are recommended for the retention of existing trees adjacent to lot 339. In regards to lot 7, the southern interface, modifications are recommended to provide vegetated planting within the road reserve. We didn't recommend or specify a width for planting, as this will likely come down to detailed design. If SPC is minded to specify a planting width, it's open to you to modify the road category from 15 meters reserve to, for example, 21-meter reserve, which that would provide a 10-meter southern verge, which can be provided as a landscape buffer. Very quickly, just an employment land. Obviously, the subject site was identified previously as light industry, but that was considered unsuitable and rezoned to urban development. The department has not assessed Dunsborough East, the amendment or the associated structure plan, and has not yet formed a view on that proposal. The matters raised in that deputation relating to strategic consideration of provision of employment land within Dunsborough is noted. I can advise that recently the city has been in initial discussions with DPLH to progress a review of their local planning strategy, at which that would be expected to review employment generation within Dunsborough. Mark and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. I think you've hit all the key points there, but I will open it up to questions from members. Commissioner,
I just will ask one question in relation to that buffer on the land on the southern boundary. Obviously, we've had two deputations address this quite specifically from the adjoining owner and also from developer Fraser. And I just wanted to get your take on whether what is being proposed, which is the 10, and it is also in the modifications, the 10-meter PAW, addresses the neighbours' concerns in relation to existing trees.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. Look, so the 8-meter buffer and the 2-meter PAW is one modification, and then there's an additional modification to protect those specific strand of trees, which is in attachment 9, second last page. There's a plan. The diagram.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, so those areas, those trees would need to be retained and suitably integrated within those lots. And obviously those lots are R2 to R10. So it's our expectation that there would be a variety of lot sizes in those areas based on site characteristics.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you. Then we will need a mover and seconder for the officer recommendation before us. Moved by Member Harmon, seconded by Member Franklin. Would like to make any comment?
Only briefly, Chair. I think it's a good outcome, and the officers have had struck the right balance. The modifications that deal with the buffer and the separation to the land to the south, I think, has been well thought through. The concept of the site being an employment generator, I think, given the location of where it is and the fact that it's flanked by rural residential on two sides, this is probably not the spot for that type of land use. Granted, it will need to go somewhere, but that's beyond the remit of what we're deliberating today. So happy to support it.
Okay, Member Franklin, would you like to add anything?
Only that I see this as a way of facilitating the next steps in the development of this land, providing essential housing choice in the Dunsborough location, and it's consistent actually with the strategic direction for the council.
Thank you. Anything further, members?
Speak briefly, Chair. Thank you. I did hear what the first deputy was saying about SPP 6.1 and his belief that it was inconsistent with that. I believe that it has actually been thoroughly addressed in the report, and I'm quite comfortable that the outcome with the modifications for this site adequately address that. And I am also comfortable also with the buffer that is proposed to the south with the modifications that really specify where those trees are and the need to address them. Also that the urban quarter have actually recognised that and been working with the neighbour, which is heartening to hear. Especially in rural areas, regional areas, it's, really, there's a little bit more care needed in some situations. And thank you also for the comments that were made about the employment land. It was something I was going to raise in other business, but I think it's already been addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. Is there anything further, members? Is there any dissent? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much, Martin and Mark.
Thank you.
We have considered item 3.2 earlier in the meeting, so we moved to 3.3, the precinct structure plan for Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan, amendment number 7. And on this item, we're joined by Dale Sanderson, Carolyn Biner, and thank you very much for your report and detailed consideration. I have to say I found the report incredibly comprehensive, and that was well done. We have had some deputations. This has been a long process with many parties involved, the town, the community group. So please, no need to go through that deep history because I think that is outlined extremely well in there. But whether there are any key issues in those deputations that you would like to respond?
Yep, certainly. Noting the need to keep it brief. Height, the base heights are similar to the existing ACP and advertised provisions. The bonuses are now capped and they're at heights that are comparable to the development that's already occurring within the precinct. Community benefit framework puts in place a structure around framework. And the formula that has the 3% based formula is as was advertised and is the same as is in similar frameworks in other areas of Perth, including South Perth and Leederville. On the southern boundary, the department's recommendation is consistent with the advertised precinct structure plan. That's the version prepared by Hatch Roberts Day, not the community-led council modified version. So in light of that, we don't think re-advertising is necessary. But also just cover off on the ask for flexibility in the M15 area in the verbal deputation. So in that area, the base height is 15 stories. A bonus of up to 15 on top of 15, up to 30 stories, we think is already significant flexibility. And it's certainly appropriate and necessary to have an ultimate limit to flexibility in our eyes. So ultimately, we think our recommendation delivers a better distribution of density over the precinct, with the focus of development being to the north of Canning Highway, capped bonus heights, improved built form outcomes at the ground level, and with more slender tower elements, which is a really critical part of the review, and an improved community benefit framework and provisions to facilitate landscape outcomes for the precinct.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any questions on this item? Any questions? Okay, we'll move to consideration of the item. If I could then have a mover and seconder. Moved by Member Harmon, seconded by Member Knight. Would you make any comment?
Again, brief. Obviously, a significant amount of work has gone into getting to this point, and so thank the officers and the city and everyone involved. I think the community benefit framework particularly has been simplified, I think, significantly from what was previously there, acknowledging the significant level of community interest in the area and the precinct, and the concerns raised. And I think in terms of the building heights and the bonuses, I think the balance, capping the bonuses, I think strikes the right balance between delivering the community benefits and maintaining development outcomes that are sort of allowed now, but also providing a level of certainty for both residents and developers in future. So yeah, look, I think it's struck the right balance and will be hopefully a solid framework to deliver more infill in such a strategic location.
Okay. Would you like to wish to add?
It's a significant community interest, and I think your comments, Member Harmon's, in terms of a balanced approach, is dead on. Their report is extensive, and you're very comfortable with it.
Okay. Members, anything further? Look, I would like to comment on this one because I think this has been an incredibly detailed assessment and review, both by the city, through the community reference group and through the department. And I'm really impressed with where this is landing. I think it's really responsive to some of the key issues. I think that in response to the changing nature of the centre, there have been growing pains, there have been design outcomes that have not been ideal, and I think that has caused the community a lot of concern in Melbourne. It has sort of led them to want to see a real paring back of this activity centre plan, and I don't think that that is right response. I think there's sort of growing pains associated with the transition and the way in which this is rolling out, where you have some high density outcomes still within a quite a low density historic typology, and that as this framework has moved and evolved, I think that this is really landing in a really strong place where it's really addressing the infill targets, and the report's really strongly outlined why this approach is necessary to meet those infill targets. That's really been well articulated. It's dealing with the key design issues that have been seen in the activity centre plan. I think that as you say, that looking at better podium outcomes, better tower separation and setbacks, landscape through those street setbacks to allow that street character to prevail, dealing with some of the overshadowing and the transitioning impacts. So I don't think that the response is to really pare back and to remove the ability for height. I think it's about having that sensitive design review, and that has happened. I think incorporating our code's volume 2 elements will certainly help. I do believe it's important for community benefit frameworks to be consistent, and I really endorse the approach that the department has taken there in looking at Leederville and South Perth and looking at that consistent approach across those community benefit frameworks. I do acknowledge that this has been high community interest, high community involvement. I think it has reacted to some of the outcomes that have been seen on ground, but I do believe that this is a very balanced outcome, and I really strongly endorse the work that the department's undertaken to reach this point, and I'm very satisfied with where you're landing here. I think this is significantly improved, so I hope that you feel very pleased with the work that you've achieved here. Very happy to endorse this approach and this recommendation. Members, is there anything further? Is there any dissent? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you. Item 3.4. Part 11B, development application for the construction of residential apartment 407 to 409 Charles Street, North Perth, for determination. On this item, we're joined by Paola De Perna, Seth Cohen Radosevich, my apologies, Seth. Thank you very much. We have heard 2 deputations today. City, one from the applicant. We also have arranged written deputation from residents in the area. Two of the key issues that have been raised and discussed through deputation, the Western response and interaction with the lower density residential in the area, and parking. But Paola, if there are other key issues that you want to go to, please do, but if you could address those 2 issues.
Certainly, through the chair. In terms of the car parking commentary, the proposed development presents in a form and scale that aligns with the R100 density, and the department's assessment has been undertaken to align with the relevant provisions of the R codes at that code. It was suggested in the deputations that if applying the R60 coding, which does relate to the site, there would be no parking provisions that would apply. However, this would seem to be somewhat selectively applying the provisions across the various densities. At R60, the development would be significantly less in scale and in density, and so could warrant no parking to be provided. However, the assessment has been done at R100 and is considered appropriate and proper to do so. The report has clearly and factually outlined the areas of concerns raised by the city and council's resolution. Following finalisation of the assessment, there was some discussion between the city's manager and the SDAU manager in relation to the details as contained in the department's report. Whilst it was acknowledged that the justification was based purely on planning grounds, there was, I suppose, a broader commentary that parking in the area should have been considered. I suppose the assessment has established or considered whether that further work would be warranted, and in the assessment it was considered that given there were 2-hour parking limits along Haynes Street, Hobart Street and Elizabeth Street, which is across the road from the development site, Monday to Friday, and the city has indicated quite clearly that it has no intention to issue resident parking permits, that there were enough controls in place to ensure that parking turnover wouldn't be an issue in those particular locations, and that the utility of requiring a comprehensive parking survey on this occasion wasn't necessarily considered warranted from the perspective. We did hear the suggestion that an advice note had been recommended. Whilst the planning application process itself doesn't deal with parking permits, it falls within the remit of the city. A advice note wasn't included. However, it has been provided to the proponent. The city's position is well understood in this regard. However, it is open to the committee as to whether or not they would like to add the additional wording relative to the advice note, and that's been provided to Commission support should that arise. Finally, in regards to the design aspect, this has been a factor that has been considered both through the planning assessment and the design review process, and advice has been provided that the contextual analysis and the streetscape elevations as they're presented resolve the matters that have been raised through the DR process, and therefore has been considered an acceptable outcome on this occasion. Just comments in regards to condition 18B as presented by the proponent in terms of the trigger for the % for art. The department has no objection in relation to that, and I will defer to Jeremy in relation to the recommended change to the PCA condition.
Thank you. So can I just clarify, sorry, my apologies, just before, are you saying you don't have an objection to the removal of the % for art?
No,
you're talking about a time
time of which, sorry, the applicant's amendment is to change the trigger from decision of to prior to occupation of development, noting that whilst we don't have any objection to that, if they are looking to integrate the artwork into the building, the building permit phase may be more appropriate, but ultimately is still capable of being addressed prior to occupation.
Understood, thank you.
And through the chair, just to speak on the portion of the PCA application very quickly, the department has no issue with the applicant's recommended fixing of administration error in condition 2 of part A.
Thank you. Members, would you like to ask questions? Covered it all. Yes, thank you. Okay, then we'll then move to consider the item. So we are now dealing with the recommendation before us, but can I put this to you in 2 parts? The first part is part A, which is dealing with the works within the PCA. We do need to consider this first because this grants access to the remainder of the development. But can I ask that we move and second this with clause 2, reading in the second sentence, if the subject development is not substantially commenced within a 4-year period, the approval shall lapse and be of no further effect. Moved by Commissioner Adair, seconded by Member Franklin. Do you wish to discuss the works within the PCA?
I don't. I'm quite comfortable.
Comfortable? Yep, okay, thank you. Is there any dissent to this part? No, thank you. Part A is dealt with. We'll now move to the substantial part of the development, which is part B. If I could then have a mover and seconder for this part. Moved by Commissioner Brooks, seconded by Member Harmon. Open the floor to any discussion.
To say, I think the design is good. I have no objection to the reduced parking for this type of development in that location. I think it's a reasonable outcome. I think it's highly likely that apartment dwellers are going to lower use of cars for this type of development. And I think the justification for it is there. I also acknowledge the difficulty with this kind of development being first in a location like this, but I think this is an important step for that area.
Harmon, do you wish to comment?
No, nothing further to add. Brooks, I will foreshadow the minor amendment 18.
Thank you.
I would move to have the timing of the provision submission of public art move to prior to occupation of development rather than prior to building permit as proposed by the applicant.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Commissioner Adair. Any discussion? No. Any dissent? Thank you. The amendment is carried. Back to the substantive as amended for any further comments or amendments. Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll comment briefly on this, given there's been so much discussion, particularly around the parking on this. These are never easy decisions to make. However, I think it's been established, and as someone earlier in the day said, that the city has actually been quite progressive in previous applications of its parking ratios and reducing parking and not requiring additional parking. In fact, they're pretty sure there are some applications that have been approved with no parking. So I think given the nature of this application, its location and the intended outcomes for this area, this is an appropriate application of a reduction in parking. It is going to be a little tricky to see how they allocate, or they're not allocating parking, how it'll actually work at the end of the day. However, as consideration for a development application, because I'm quite comfortable in supporting it. When it comes to the public art, I think I do understand that it was requested that it actually be removed as a condition. However, it's a well-established practice. Public art should be part of any kind of public development, regardless of the end user. And I do understand the metrics and the argument that it adds additional cost to the end purchaser. However, it does contribute also to the benefits of not only the public, but the users of these apartments. So I'm quite comfortable with where it's landed.
Thank you very much. Is there any appetite to consider a further advice note in relation to parking permits as requested by the city?
That's it, it's necessary.
Just a point of clarification, could the parking management plan provide such?
Through the chair, in relation, just to clarify, in relation to the parking permit arrangement, through the chair, yes, the commentary could be added to the parking management plan. However, ultimately, any process to seek approval will sit with the city.
So you're happy for it to be contained within the parking management plan? So if we could just note that for the minutes, that reference to the fact that the City of Vincent will not issue parking permits to residents of the development would be included in the parking management plan.
Is that an actual amendment?
It doesn't require an amendment, is my understanding.
Clarifying that it could.
I'm taking your advice, Paula, that is can be included and will be.
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. It can be an amendment if there's a view that they would like, and be an advice note if there's appetite for that.
No, my question was really whether we need to amend the thing around the parking management plan to incorporate.
We actually set it out, say a matter that needs to be included. It's just that it doesn't go into a lot of detail, does it?
There's nothing we can enforce. I'm happy to leave it as it is. Just ask the question.
That plan, but the outcome.
Check the question.
I was just checking. While you do that, Pal, I would like to comment on this application because it has received quite a lot of feedback from the community. I think that first of all, there has been a bit of discussion around the exercise of discretion, and I'm comfortable with the officer's advice to us in that they can't consider the PCA development site, and that does then bring it just below that 200 square metres to automatically activate the R100, but it is incredibly close, and I think that it's a minor variation there. In terms of the parking, I think it's so linked to the location and context. So we're looking at a site that's about 3 kilometres from the CBD. It's serviced by, it's a transit corridor serviced by key bus routes. It's got really good amenity and facilities close by, including the North Perth Town Centre, Anglo Street, shopping centre, parks, Charles. There's a lot of amenity in the area, which is in a very walkable catchment. So I think the car parking shortfall in the context of the location and the transit corridor, as well as the accommodation of a range of bicycle, motorcycle parking, and I think in excess in the bicycle parking is all sort of accommodated and goes towards that reduction. We've talked to the city about the fact that they do have restricted local streets and that it is within their remit to look at that further if there is seen to be a negative impact from this development on parking in the locality. I think the building height and bulk is appropriate for this location. I don't see there's been any major deviation from what would be expected in this location under the local planning framework. It's I believe, a well-designed building. SDRP has looked at this closely. They've looked at the western interface, and I think that they are very broadly supportive. It also has a very good landscape outcome. So I think that in terms of the actual presentation of the building, this is actually a very good design for Charles Street, where we do have all sorts of different design outcomes on this street, and this will be a very positive addition to this transit corridor. I do believe that a lot of the commentary that has been raised through public submissions about social housing, we do need to put that to one side. It's not a planning consideration. We are actually dealing with multiple dwellings here. But even if we were, things about antisocial behaviour, etc., is really sort of view rather than a planning consideration, and something that I think that we would deal with under the planning system, and can sort of kind of reach into those perception issues, which is not, as I say, valid planning matters. And look, I think that there has been a good outcome here, and I think that once constructed, it will settle into this part of the neighbourhood well. Are there any further comments or any dissent? Thank you. The item is carried. That takes us to item 3.5, part 11B, development application for development at Lake Road and Bay Court in Champion Lakes. And on this item, we're also Ella DePerna and Owen Radisovich.
Item 2 minutes. The part A, there was a mention of an administrative change. I take it, had that actually been incorporated in the recommendation? It had. Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, so we have heard primarily about connectivity and access issues here, and we had heard from the adjoining lot 9,000 in relation to what they say are impacts on their subdivision. Could we have your thoughts on that, please?
Certainly, through the chair. Maybe just to commence with it, just reaffirming that the discretion that's been sought for this application doesn't trigger the 171R as had been highlighted earlier, and it represents a departure from the structure plan, which is a due regard instrument for which there is flexibility within that instrument. The connectivity and the departure and the impacts of the departure to the structure plan have been a key consideration that has been sort of detailed in the report. However, touching on a couple of the methods in particular is that in terms of the current temporary connection that's provided across the subdivision to the south in order to allow for circulation, as I understand, there are a number of options that can be considered in order to facilitate that. The one presented by the proponent of the subdivided land is one way in which that could be achieved. I understand and have been advised that the opportunity to provide a cul-de-sac head of 20-metre diameter that would allow for servicing could be accommodated within that land to the south without reducing yield to that development site. Again, it is an alternative and an option for them to explore. Noting that the temporary arrangements that are in place could be for an unspecified period until such time that the land the subject of the development application would be developed. It's just at this point in time that the proposal has been presented for permanent modification, and so those interim arrangements will need to be accommodated in perpetuity. And as a result of that, there are still options for the development to the south to maintain road access and circulation, either by formalising the interim arrangement that's in place or such other arrangements that could still facilitate an acceptable outcome.
So for clarity, we've heard from the adjoining landowner that they feel that they're going to lose yield and that it's going to affect the those lots to the value of about $2 million. Are you saying that you do believe there is an outcome that avoids that?
Through the chair, given that the lot sizes of lot 825 and 836, they are currently sitting at 123 and 469 square metres respectively. Under an R25 coding, those lots could go down to 300 metres, and so a 20-metre cul-de-sac bulb could be accommodated within that existing as to an extension to that existing road to allow for turnaround space and servicing without losing the yield. So that's been the department's preliminary assessment that's informed that there is an acceptable outcome that can be accommodated into the future.
The matters that you would raise, are you happy to take questions now?
I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Members, do you have questions on this item? Go ahead, Member Franklin.
Just thank you through the chair. In regard to the open space component and how that is treated within the proposal, obviously there have been an expectation through the structure plan that public open space be provided. What discussions have been and what contemplations in regard to the interface with that open space and what benefit does that provide as a departure from the structure plan?
Through the chair, in terms of the interface, the location and areas that were identified under the structure plan generally align to where the green space is located. In terms of the interface, there will be fencing proposed along that edge, and that the sheet 10 of 20 in the development pack actually sets out that interface treatment to be open style fencing. So there is still intended to be an appropriate interface for the open space to the foreshore reserve.
Any further questions?
Sorry, more just a procedural one in terms of back to the concept of the adjoining property having the ability to make modifications to turn currently temporary measures to permanent measures, for a bit of a term. What would be the process for that? They have to revise their subdivision approval.
Through the chair, as I understand, an amendment to their subdivision approval would be required. That would be the ordinary process consideration of those modifications in the context of should the committee approve the application.
Yeah.
I think they've put this forward as a sort of orderly and proper issue, that it's procedurally unfair because they have an approval. In light of what we've heard today and the fact that, as you're saying, the cul-de-sac heads can be accommodated, there would be a reduction in the lot size, but not the yield. Do you think that is an unfair impact from the development application that we're dealing with today, or do you think that it's an outcome based on the type of outcome that we're seeing here, which is different to what was proposed under the structure plan, in terms of it being an extension of Lifestyle Village?
Through the chair, whilst the typology, if we call it that, in terms of the Lifestyle Village, as opposed to it being subdivided lots, still is consistent with the residential yield and development contemplated. The access is primarily the difference. In terms of whether it's orderly and proper, it's gone through a full assessment process. The arrangements or the temporary arrangements at the moment that the applicant the proponent for the southern lot has in place has a more significant impact on their ability to generate or lose lots. So there are, but as outlined, as that this doesn't procedurally result in an impact beyond what has already been approved. It would probably allow for a permanent arrangement for them to implement their full yield.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful. Members, are there any further questions? Okay, we'll then move to consideration of the item. If I can then have a mover and seconder for the recommendation for us. Got to finish the meeting. People need a break. Is that outstanding concerns? Would it help to ask some further questions?
Yeah.
Oh, we have to move it in order to.
But it depends if you're ready to discuss or whether you have further questions.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
In terms, so I'm struggling with the landowner to the south. there's a cul-de-sac head being proposed within this lot at the southern end, which that is self-explanatory. But the other two is sort of where I struggle. Whaler Road connection, could the cul-de-sac head be located within the POS? The possibilities, so we're not losing developable land that's already approved.
Portion, through the chair, a portion of the cul-de-sac head, it would be subject to a more comprehensive design. The residential lot at the end of that, road at the moment, is larger, similar to the extension of Campira. So in terms of the placement of the cul-de-sac head, it would be subject to some technical design aspects, but as we understand, the lot sizes that themselves would still meet the applicable density coding. It would be subject to some technical documentation as to where the cul-de-sac bulb would be located. It may impinge slightly on the POS. However, that would, like I said, that would be subject to a full design consideration.
Go ahead, Member Knight.
Just wondering, in terms of a deferral, what is the risk deferral to seek further clarity on this?
Well, it's open to the Commission to seek to do that, but we just have to be clear on the information that you're seeking through a deferral.
And through the chair and the time frame for which
Statutory time frame.
The matter would
Deemed
be presented.
potential for deemed refusal. I'm just wondering, is there a plan or diagram that you could bring up on the screen? I just feel like
Shows how.
There's a hesitancy here. I'm just trying to see if there's any information that you have to hand that you could talk through in more detail that could.
We're presuming what another landowner can and do to actually accommodate this. We don't actually have to presume. In fact, it's been indicated to the contrary. So they're not part of this application. If they were co-applicants to this, then we'd have more comfort.
I understand. I'm just giving you the opportunity for any further information that you want to present, because I feel that there is there's a hesitancy here and I think potential for deferral.
Understand, through the chair, we do have a preliminary mock-up, a very simplistic desktop arrangement that we have prepared. Not too sure how we would present that on the screen.
Would it be to send it to Commission support?
Yeah, please.
Chair.
Do a snippet.
Screen. It's been sent through, Jonathan.
Right.
Okay.
Through the chair, the diagram up on the screen does crudely reflect a 20-metre cul-de-sac head to scale relative to the diagram approved subdivision plan for the lots to the south. It sort of highlights the extent of impact both on the residential lots and the POS. I'm speaking to Member Harmon's question earlier. If this represents that the committee is comfortable in as an alternative, a condition could be imposed on this development application that requires suitable arrangements being made to facilitate works outside of the development site. It is, and I've had a short word with the proponent in relation to that. I understand that these arrangements are palatable in terms of subject to some wording being prepared. However, it is an option available to the committee to impose such a condition given the resultant impact on the development site to the south.
Through the chair, can I make one comment on this? That
no, I'm sorry. It's just it's not possible at this stage of the meeting.
The question, the concept of a condition suitable arrangement. Are we not getting into the territory of whether it's a valid condition? Because we're almost then relying on a third party. Now, in this case, it's not an agency, it's a landowner, but it's still a third party that may or may not be willing. Probably indicating that they're not.
Through the chair, in terms of the test of a valid planning condition, I suppose the suitable arrangements provisions it's not requiring approval of a third party. It's suggesting that arrangements being made. So, you know, in terms of it, if the condition had been, if a condition is worded to the extent that approval is sought from the landowner to the south, I would suggest that a condition worded in that fashion wouldn't satisfy the tests of a valid planning condition. However, suitable arrangements being made is broad enough to facilitate an outcome. If the outcome is then not capable of being implemented, the approval can't be actioned, and then the applicant would need to reevaluate as to how that matter would be otherwise addressed.
Paola, if there was a view to defer this item to allow this matter to be further considered, given that this is then requiring the landowner of lot 9,000 to amend their existing structure plan, I'm just wanting to sort of seek some advice from you on what that would actually look like and you know, how the deferral would assist in dealing with this issue, given that it would require an amendment to a structure, to a subdivision on the
also
adjoining lot.
Spaces.
Through the chair, in terms of the process, it wouldn't necessarily require full resolution and approval of the subdivision to the south. It could be an agreement that is reached between the parties to facilitate the determination of that application as it currently stands. But to that end, a deferral, as I highlighted, would need to be for a specified period to allow for the matter to be additional information to be provided to either address it to the satisfaction of the committee or to demonstrate a sufficient suitability of being capable of being addressed ultimately through a condition.
Cool, I'm happy to move. I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Seconder? Even if there is a deferral, we do need to move and second the motion. You can't have a procedural motion without doing so. Commissioner Brooks. Member Harmon.
In light of the consultation said, I actually think, so my preference would be to move as put to us in the officer's recommendation with the modification of the condition to and in terms of satisfactory arrangements or suitable arrangements being made with the adjoining owner. I think weighing up whether it be deferred, I'm not comfortable with it in its current form. I think that's clear, but I think weighing up whether it be deferred or whether it be approved with that condition, I think the condition actually gives the adjoining owner more input, if you like, and it's probably tighter than a simple deferral for a period of time. And I think that's important in this context, and it leaves it open to the two parties to make whatever arrangement they see fit. And if they can't, then
okay, well, I think that probably the best thing to do at this stage is to move it as written and then to have the wording of the amendment or shadowed amendment provided on screen so that everyone can see that, to deal with that separately. Ella, what stage is that at?
Also just want to comment, my concern, I think with that amendment is whether we ought to also be referencing the local government in terms of their willingness to accept the modified subdivision
and revised public
open space. So I sort of think there's a third party there that ought to be included in those discussions, because at least to provide some certainty that southern landowner that you know, city are willing to accept what's agreed. Seems to me to be a part.
Carla, did you hear what Member Commissioner Brooks was saying there about the local governments?
Yes, through the chair, the condition could be worded on advice from the City of Armidale in that instance, but it can be captured within that condition.
Okay.
I'm just working through some.
I'll give you some time.
Amendments, some addition to that condition. So if you bear with me for a moment. Through the chair, read the preliminary draft before we put it up on screen, and it reads to the extent that prior to the commencement of development, suitable arrangements are made in relation to facilitating an alternative access to the approved subdivision on lot 9,000 on advice from the City of Armidale.
Input, members. Right, so we've moved and seconded the item. We have text for a potential amendment, and we have a discussion in play about deferral. So there are options presented to members, but Carmen, did you indicate that you'd like to move that amendment?
yes.
Right, is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Would you like to discuss that?
No, look, I touched on it earlier, but I think it just gives a degree of flexibility within that approval, come up with an alternative solution and without prejudicing what that might be, it may not be that the burden of the two cul-de-sac heads fall within the adjoining lot, as was shown before. There's a hobby shed at the subject site that could accommodate part of it, for example. The loss of developable land could be shared. There's a whole bunch of ways to deal with it, but it's beyond today's discussion. I don't think it's fatal to the development, and so I think a refusal would be handed. But yeah, I think the matter certainly needs to be resolved. I think the condition provides the forum for that to occur.
Commissioner Brooks, you've seconded. Are you indicating you're supporting?
Yes, yeah, I think it's a reasonable way forward. Yeah, similarly, I'm comfortable with not having any kind of resolution of it. But with that condition added, it provides some understanding that it does need to be resolved jointly. And obviously, I think it's important that the city are involved in that process so that they can provide advice as to the changes to any public open space boundaries, and also the road network ultimately is something that they will have to take over, so they need to be in that process as well.
Carla, who were indicating.
Yeah, I've just provided commission support with the wording, so that can come up on screen. It does include the satisfaction of the Development Planning Commission, which I didn't read out.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Where should this be inserted? Sorry.
Paola, where would it be most appropriately inserted? Is it just a final condition, or
be added as the last condition?
Last condition, please. Yes.
For purposes of advice note numbering, it would be most simplistic. No, sorry, they're advice notes there. Sorry, Jonathan. It would be above the last numbers.
Yeah. The last condition before the advice notes. Yeah.
3. It would be 24.
Thank you. So we have a mover and seconder. Both have spoken. Is there any further debate on the amendment? Is there any dissent? There's dissent from Member Franklin, but that has carried. And we're now back to an amended substantive motion. Is there any further discussion on this application? Okay, thank you. Look, I do think that is an important consideration. Thank you very much for flagging that. I do think this is a pragmatic way to deal with it, and it has been really a key issue that's been raised through the deputations and deliberations today. So I do think this is a good, it acknowledges the issue, and it acknowledges the responsibility for this to be dealt with prior to development. So I think this resolves the issue that we've been talking about today. And other than that, satisfied with the report that's been provided and happy to support development as proposed. Is there any dissent to the application?
It was a dissent. My dissent previously. Yeah.
The amendment,
Yeah.
to the substantive motion, are you also dissenting?
Yes, in part. Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yes, in part, or
yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. So that is carried with dissent from Member Frank. Thank you. Okay, we're now to our last item for today. A very long meeting. And this is item 3.6, part 11B, development application for the mixed-use development at 930 Albany Highway, East Victoria Park. And on this item, we're joined again by Seth and Katina Marchbank. Welcome, Katina. No. Very detailed discussion which resulted in an amendment, so. Yep. Okay, so Seth and Katina, we've had a very strong deputation from the town today. We've had a equally robust response from the applicant. Are there any of those issues that have been raised today through the deputations or key matters that you wish to address?
Thank you. Through the chair. Just the first point is that there was typographical oversight on one aspect in the report. So on page 16, under the height, bulk and scale heading, it does state there that where it talks about the PSP providing for a maximum of 6 stories or up to 9 stories where the bonus provisions are satisfied, that should say 8 stories, but that would align with the remainder of the report. It's just the one spot where it was oversight.
Thank you for highlighting that, Seth. I have to say I read the report as 8 stories. I didn't pick up that there was a one point it was mentioned at 9 because I think the majority of the report speaks to the 8 stories. So that was clear for me and hopefully for others.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for raising it. And more substantive matters that have been raised today.
To the chair, with respect to from the town in relation to the details of the report, it's worth noting that we report by exception, where when elements of a framework are not directly met by a set requirement, it is considered against the objectives. Then we look at it holistically against the overall objectives of the precinct structure plan. Whilst there are components like the plot ratio, which at face value would look like it's quite substantial, there's also some understanding of due to the slope of the site. That plot ratio number is increased not because of the number of dwellings, but because of some of the car parking. So all of level 3, except actually no, all of level 3, sorry, apologies, and half of level 2 add to the plot ratio calculation because that car parking is above natural ground level. So that compounds that number, which can make it look more dramatic if it's considered to be adding to the floor area of the apartments. With respect to the overall height with the additional story, it was looked at in the context of the 2 towers being provided, and the impact of that in the context of if it was just 8 stories as one complete building. The separation of the towers does allow for a better amenity, not only internally, but for the adjoining properties, because it does give that break. It allows the breeze and natural light to go through. So those components were considered on balance with the remainder of the provisions within the PSP as to how it's been assessed. The officer assessment has come to the resolution that it does align with the strategic intent for Albany Highway, and the measures that they have incorporated to mitigate any adverse impact on the streetscape and adjoining properties have been appropriately proposed in the development incorporated.
Okay. Members, questions on this item? Questions? Okay, we'll move to consider the item then. There is a mover and seconder for the recommendation before us. Moved by Member Harmon, seconded by.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Dare. Discussion?
Thank you, Chair. I struggled with this one a little bit, and I think the town's comments are completely valid. And I think if the proposal were 8 stories, would I be more comfortable? The answer is probably yes, and I think the town possibly would be as well. But is that an additional story sufficient to warrant a refusal, given that the PSP and the emerging planning framework does support substantial intensification in this area? The answer is probably no. I think it probably wasn't maybe not fleshed out in the officer's report in great detail, but I think the parking is a bigger driver for the plot ratio and the height. And I think it's not an attempt to squeeze more yield out of the proposal by not going a basement. I think the fact that the parking is above ground is probably the difference between this going ahead at all or not. And so in that context, I'm more comfortable to support what is a relatively minor variation to the draft PSP in terms of height and plot ratio. Added to the fact that it's been to 3 or 4 CRP meetings, including local ones and state, and received support from there, I think gives an added level of comfort, but that's the basis for which I'm willing to support it.
Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. I struggled with this one also, but primarily because I just don't like the design. But that's irrelevant at the end of the day. I do think that the 1-story, it's neither here nor there. I think that the gradient of this site, the fall of the site is dictating the outcome. And the parking design, the way it is, I understood completely. I looked at it previously and just went, well, you don't really have any options. It's going to get too steep if you start going down below, and there's no access off Albany Highway. So you really have only one option. So from a design layout perspective, apart from the visual amenity of it, yeah, I'm happy to support it. I understand where the town is coming from, and when you've got a new framework and you really want, it's laying out exactly what you want, the first one to come off the rank is to have a variation to it. It's a consequence of the land and the viability of it. So I can support it in its current form. Thank you for the work.
I'm just going to add to that. I think the topography of the site can't be underestimated, and I think this is a very pragmatic response to that.
I do understand the passion from the town for their PSP, and I think when you look at the table that Robert presented from the town, you do look at that and it is jarring, but I don't think that it's the nuanced response that really does deal with the issues that are in play here for the site, and what's driving the ratio, the fact that I think, Alan Stewart was quite convincing in talking about the topography, the fact that this land has remained vacant for decades, that it's sort of it does need to really respond to the topography. And I think that that whilst I take your point, Commissioner Adair, about do I love the sort of elevation, that's it's going through design review, and I think they've sort of accepted that there's articulation there, but I think the building separation of the towers is good.
Yes.
So that's a strength of this building, that they have separated. The towers have been responsive to design review in doing so, and I think that's a good outcome. That we heard about the inability to ramp to basement from Terminus Lane. I take that as a significant matter, that's why they've landed on the parking solution that they have. And I do think that there has been responsiveness just to the issues that have been raised through design review, noting that they were there 4 times. So there's definitely been a sort of strong role from design review in really attempting to deal with some of these design issues. And when you start to look at like the sort of things around what is the actual impact of the podium, and it talks in the report about the podium under the R codes at 4 stories is 15 metres, this is setting at 13.3. So you start to sort of see that there are nuances. There are nuances here that the report talks about at 9 stories. It's not further detrimental impact than it would at 8 stories, and that building separation has been important. I think we're all a bit perplexed by the laundry issue, but as Robert said, it's probably the least of their contentions. And interestingly, on this one, we did get a stronger support from the advertising than we did, which is not usual when we're seeing development of a scale new to a corridor. But in this case, we did see 62% of public submissions supporting or strongly supporting, with 35% opposing. That's not the indicator of, it's not a vote, as we all know in planning, but it is certainly, seems to me that the community is saying that, this is important for the strip. It will support the local economy and the, the vibrant sort of emerging streetscape there. We do want to see residential development in this area. And I think that, for the outcome that we're seeing here for the site, I agree that this should be supported. Any further comments? Is there any dissent? Thank you. That is carried. Members, our confidential item 4.1 was on in the meeting due to a lack of quorum. So unless there's any urgent or other business at this stage, after a long meeting, perhaps not. So I thank you all for your time today on what has been quite a and declare the meeting at 1:41 p.m.